plus lectures, plus something else all the time. So I just asking, let me know when I'm wanted.
What's the best time for you? We have a couple of time slots available. Just,
what is in the menu? Fish or meat?
Oh. I will have to ask my wife.
Just give me the choice.
If we will make it, let's say, closer to the end, it might be something like, let me check again, something like 15:30.
Oh, it's too anything.
Okay, then let's make it the other way, and let's make it, just a second, 13:30.
13:30, perfect.
Great.
Vladimir, should we have breaks? As we decided before.
Yes, I think we have plans in between the sessions.
Great.
And, the program hasn't been corrected much, but some replacements might take place because of the experts' time schedules. And please feel free to either to participate or just leave the table for some time. I don't think we need all the audience all the time, whatever you say.
Absolutely right. And we're enough flexible.
Thank you.
But what I would like to ask you, so the time for presentation, 10 minutes, no more. Do you agree with it?
Yes. Yeah, I think that was expected, actually. That's what.
Yes, as it was expected, because in our experience, people try to speak much more than 10 minutes.
Really?
Well, sometimes it's interesting, but if many of them speak for such a long time, the conference, becomes too long.
That's why moderators are needed.
By the way,
It's sometimes unbearable.
yeah, that's right. Let me give you the instruction I received from academician Entov, we have such big economists in Moscow. When I was 30 years old, I was speaking first time at the academic council in IMEMO. He told me 3 rules for the young speaker, that probably it's more universal rule. Number 1, save a minute. Means don't even take your time, maybe save a minute. Second, don't, I don't know how to translate, but in Russian это не выворачивай карман. Don't try to say everything you know.
Pockets, yes.
And point number 3, tell at least something interesting, not to you, but to the audience.
Dear colleagues, we should start.
Okay. Доктор Рар, добрый день.
Здравствуйте всем. Hello. Thank you for invitation.
Сейчас мы попробуем ролик запустить с приветствием. Мы с вами все делаем, поэтому нас можно...
Володя, ролик виден?
Нет?
Нет еще.
Сейчас. Вот стоило, что получится. Сейчас.
Уважаемые коллеги, дорогие друзья, разрешите от имени факультета глобальных процессов Московского университета, всех организаторов нашего общего дела, 6-го международного научного конгресса «Глобалистика 2020», от всей души искренне поприветствовать, пожелать успехов в работе и, конечно, сейчас крепкого инициатив нашего факультета, инициатив Московского университета последних лет. Самое важное, что эта инициатива была поддержана фактически всем образовательным сообществом. Этому проекту уже более 10 лет. Дело в том, что первый конгресс прошел еще в 2009 году, и он стал научной площадкой для обсуждения таких перспективных научных междисциплинарных направлений в области, в первую очередь, глобальных исследований, учеными фактически всего мира. И было очень приятно, что, начиная с первого конгресса, и вот уже 6-й конгресс мы проводим, площадки нашего научного мероприятия собрали фактически 10-15 тысяч ученых из более чем 50 стран мира, фактически со всех континентов, кроме Антарктиды. А среди гостей, основных спикеров конгресса стали, без сомнений, всемирно известные ученые, выдающиеся специалисты, которые сделали себе не только яркое, всем известное имя, но и внесли существенный вклад в развитие научных исследований, внесли существенный вклад в решение глобальных проблем. За годы проведения, еще раз хочу подчеркнуть, это стало фактически крупнейшим научным мероприятием по глобальной тематике и проблематике. А тематика, которая была вынесена на площадке Конгресса, она без сомнения реагировала, очень чутко реагировала на актуализированную глобальную повестку дня в области глобального развития международных отношений. Уважаемые коллеги, дорогие участники Международного научного конгресса «Глобалистика 2020», конечно, я хотел бы всем пожелать в эти дни очень успешной работы, очень плодотворного сотрудничества. Мы так соскучились по общению, по обмену мнениями, по обмену идеями. Тем более, действительно, человечество стоит перед новой глобальной проблемой, перед новой глобальной угрозой. Я бы хотел от всей души пожелать не только успехов, но и крепкого здоровья. В наши дни это очень актуально и очень важно. Но самое главное – это сохранять и здравый смысл, бодрое настроение, оптимистический взгляд в будущее, несмотря на иногда мрачные прогнозы. И до скорой встречи, дорогие мои, уважаемые, любимые участники, организаторы нашего общего дела, которое объединило нас, сплотило нас. И вот этот проект «Конгресс Глобалистика» стал очень знаковым, важным. Не только в научно-образовательном сообществе, но и в жизни каждого из нас. Желаю вам от всей души хорошего настроения, бодрого самочувствия и новых интеллектуальных побед. Спасибо за внимание.
Так, дорогие коллеги, я присоединяюсь полностью к поздравлениям нашего декана Ильи Вячеславовича Ильина. Я хочу от себя добавить, что то, что наш конгресс состоялся, это огромная заслуга именно нашего декана, который сумел настоять, чтобы конгресс прошел хотя бы в онлайн формате, потому что, как вы знаете, намечалось, что он пройдет в Москве, в Московском университете. Мы всех вас приглашали, всех ждали у себя, думали, что увидим вас лично, за круглым столом, именно за круглым столом, как мы и намеревались сделать, обсудим проблемы общества и экономики 21 века и вызовов, которые стоят перед ними. Но не получилось. Но то, что получилось, это хотя бы в таком формате, и это прекрасно. Мы можем обсуждать эти темы. Правда, мы не сидим за круглым столом, но это не самое главное и не самое страшное. Главное, что мы можем говорить и обсуждать. Я передаю бразды правления пока что модератору, сомодератору нашего круглого стола, господину Куликову. Господин Куликов, пожалуйста, управляйте, я буду вам помогать, всецело иногда буду брать на себя, если это понадобится. Пожалуйста, начинаем. Коллеги, я прошу вас только перед каждым выступлением представляться, потому что не у всех отмечены их имена и фамилии. Вот я вижу, что у кого-то есть, у кого-то нет. Это нам нужно для записи. Все записи у нас сохранятся, будут существовать они у нас в нашей библиотеке, чтобы каждый желающий, кого интересуют проблемы глобалистики, проблемы общества и экономики, их развития, могли бы всегда посмотреть наш круглый стол, и чтобы мы могли таким образом поделиться с ними нашими мудрыми мыслями. Я надеюсь, у нас все пройдет хорошо. Господин Куликов, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much. Alexander, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I will try to spend a minute not to translate completely the welcoming words of the Dean of the Faculty of Global Processes, Professor Ilyin, whose words were very warm and very supportive, very optimistic, and he said, and then Alexander Gasparishvili also repeated it, that since this is quite an old initiative which has been carried on for 10 years nowadays, he's quite positive about the future development of this initiative, and he thinks that in a year or two from now we'll have a chance for online communication and offline communication both. And I'm not going to translate it in every detail, but the idea is that the Congress has been working for 10 years now, and the Congress will be working next year and the year after. Like, let's say 2 years ago, the Congress was mostly devoted to the idea of green economy. So possibly next year, some other topic will be proposed for work, for publication, and for kind of sophisticated cooperation between you, dear friends, and dear experts, and the Moscow State University. While our roundtable does not cover all the problematic of the Congress, we are kind of facilitating it, and hopefully we'll achieve some result. We are facilitating the idea of the Congress, the idea of peaceful cooperation, the idea of peaceful intellectual cooperation, and just one more remark for those who are not very well informed. March this year, Moscow State University, which I have been a student in late 70s, has marked its 265th anniversary, which makes it not only one of the oldest in Russia, but which kind of always was more devoted to the ideas of peace, progress, and critical thinking. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Professor Alexander Akimov. Sorry, I will use not the names because we have 7 Alexanders together, and I will use the family name, okay? So it's going to be Akimov.
Yeah, just one Vladimir?
Yes.
Good.
Well, who is always kind of, you know, a troublemaker.
Thank you.
Professor Akimov, you need a presentation, correct?
Yeah.
Please tell me when you will need it.
Thank you. Let's get started.
Let's start. Okay. Just a moment. Probably you'll start and I'll.
Okay.
Okay. No. Okay.
Okay.
That's it. That's it.
Dear colleagues, I hope the Faculty of Global Studies is the right place to make a provocative claim that global problems, as we call it in Russia, or limits to growth, as they are called in English language, are no longer a global phenomenon. The next slide, please. Next, thank you. Please have a look. The slide shows that problems that are considered to be global since the early reports to the Club of Rome are demographic, food, raw materials, power, and environment. And the main idea is that demographic growth and economic growth lead to resource scarcity and environmental degradation. And I insist that the situation changes greatly and the global problems are no more, as they are mentioned here, are no more global, they are local. They are localized in the region of South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, because the countries of these two regions are less equipped with new technology. My second provocative statement is that the results of the fourth industrial revolution and the accumulation of labor and resource-saving technologies in the most technologically developed countries form a new system of productive forces. There is a traditional set of production factors: labor, capital, and natural resources. And now, the role of natural resources and human labor is significantly reduced. Now, thank you. And the importance of technologies, the previous one, please. Thank you. And just look at this slide. What is this new system of productive forces? The base is the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, but we shouldn't include IT there. Why? Because they are a rather source of the IT mainly is for consumption, but not for production. It is a means of control and production, but it doesn't make, IT doesn't make things. What is important? We should plus labor and resource saving technologies of the previous period. They are there, some of them. See, there are some technologies which are very important for modern industry, for modern production technologies, but they have nothing to do with the fourth industrial revolution. For instance, there is such a technology, such production complexes as crushing units in mining. Crushing units are huge machines which just rotate and move soil and coal and ore and so on and so forth. They have nothing to do with information technology, but they removed human labor from mining. So I suppose it's clear what is on the slide. So let's go on, and please. Thank you. There are two items in the two features of the new system of production forces. Resource saving part of this new system of production forces removed the severity of global problems or limits to growth. But the second side, labor saving, has both positive and negative components. The positive side is the solving of problems of labor shortage in the aging population. Aging population is a real global problem. And it is solved by those labor-saving technologies. The other benefit of this new system of productive forces is the improving of quality of products, because human participation, human labor participation is minimal. And now the third statement, which I want to present. There are new problems which are initiated by the new productive forces. These new problems are potentially very acute and may take the place of global problems, both in scope and in significance. The main problem is, what should people do with the further development of labor-saving technology? I should say that coronavirus has set up a big social experiment. Many people don't work, but life support doesn't suffer. The fact is that it is provided by labor-saving technologies in agriculture, energy, and transport. A small number of people provides for the existence of many. And there are two already clearly defined trends: the increase of property inequality, which Tamate Kiki knows, and the development of labor-saving technology. Let's just imagine that they are developing for a couple of decades. And then we can identify four main scenarios for social and economic development. Please, the next slide. Thank you. These are the names, and so I comment of what is the idea of each scenario. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. The new Rome scenario is an analog of ancient Rome. The social system of ancient Rome has been existing for many centuries. So just remove slaves and you may have the analog of this stable social system. Next slide, please. Communism by Karl Marx. Contrary to the previous scenario, I can't present you any real example of this scenario in life. But this model can be maybe classified as ideal model, but it is quite possible as a social democratic project. Besides, it's it has some grounds in Islamic world. So next slide, please. Anti-utopia or dystopia. That's the worst what can happen. But unfortunately, I can present you some examples of this scenario in the history of the 20th century. I hope the idea is clear. The next slide, please. So cheap labor in the service sector. This scenario is a free market option. This is the development of free labor market in a competitive environment. In the previous scenarios, the market is excluded and resources are distributed by the state. This set of scenarios illustrates the kind of problems that the new system of productive forces can create. There are very many new challenges besides these scenarios, but they are shaping new global processes. How do we work with them? How can we manage these problems, these challenges? It is appropriate to recall that the role of the Club of Rome was really great in solving global problems or limits to growth. It was this institute called the Club of Rome that initiated a broad discussion of the problems identified in the first report to the Club of Rome. It seems to me that the Department of Global Studies, the Faculty of Global Studies, will probably become the center for research of this issue. But I would like to draw your attention to the capabilities of the International Institute for Economic and Social Studies in Vienna. Now, this is an international structure, international institute that is independent but has strong links with the expert communities of many countries. It seems that expert discussions and forecasts within this institute would be useful in analyzing old and new global problems. Thank you for your time. I hope I said something that is interesting not only for me. Thank you.
Alexander, thank you very much. Большое спасибо, Александр. Очень сконцентрированное и очень яркое выступление с далеко идущими возможностями для работы. Thank you very much.
May I say, Vladimir, may I say to you, Alexander, thank you so much for your presentation. I believe it will be very valuable for our faculty. And if you don't mind, I would like to include your presentation in the teaching materials for our students.
Thank you. Okay.
Great. So everything appreciated immediately. One doesn't have to add warm words. Большое спасибо. Все мгновенно воспринято, все мгновенно, как на производстве, уходит в работу. I had a message from Oksana Gamangalutvina, a professor from GIMO. She asks for a 15-minute delay. Are you ready to replace her in this time slot?
Sure. Are you ready for
Do you have asked me?
presentation? Yes, sure.
Sure. Okay, I can do it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Спасибо большое. Я попросил профессора Рица заменить Оксану Викторовну Гаман-Галутвину, потому что она просит 15-минутную отсрочку.
Okay. Thank you very much for the honor to speak at this conference. I'm a publicist and a lecturer at the University of Gießen. I wrote my doctoral in philosophy, and I'm also trying to understand the foreign policy of our time, especially the new Cold War, from a philosophical and cultural perspective. Yeah, when I received several months ago the invitation for this conference, I really couldn't imagine that it would take in such a format. It is really a testimony to the geopolitical shift and historical shift which we are witnessing today. There are several trends in today's world which are really concerning. We have the ongoing rise of China and East Asia, and in the same time, a nearly constant decline of the West. And it's really difficult to imagine that this could continue in a peaceful manner. At the same time, we have a set of new technology on the horizon of history. Technologies like artificial intelligence, data mining, 5G, genetic engineering. And what is really concerning about those technologies is that their implementation seems to undermine the humanistic foundation of European civilization. And from my perspective, Russia is a part of those European civilization, even though it has some independence, cultural independence. And the third trend that is really concerning is that we have, in the same time, a dramatic concentration of wealth. During the virus crisis in the United States, American oligarchs like Bill Gates and Bloomberg openly acted as if they were state institutions. And just recently made the news the headline that the head of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, will be 6 years from now the first trillionaire in human history. And it doesn't matter if you are political on the left side or on the right side. I think everybody understands that such a concentration of wealth is a problem for the political system, for the civilization as a whole. And that there is the danger that if this wealth concentration continues, that we may head it towards a neo-feudal order. And if you combine this perspective with the rise of the of a kind of surveillance, then we are really a reason to fear towards this future. And I'd like to raise if there are forces in our world today which could the process towards a direction. And to mind is, of course, that the Western world and the rise of the Eastern world will probably create room for different civilizations. For example, there could rise an Asian or Eurasian civilization, could do things a little bit different, so that there's.
Alexander, I'm sorry. Can you put your earphones on, because there are some problems not with the video but the quality of voice translation. Just
okay. My earphone is
fantastic. It's very interesting, very provocative, but there are some problems with voice translation.
Yeah. So I will do it. Do you hear me now?
Perfect. Fantastic. We can't
Fantastic.
see you at the moment, but we hear you perfect.
Yeah. So the problem so there could be the one solution to the problem is that there's a second model of civilization arising at the beside the Western world, which could do things different. But in recent time, I have become more pessimistic toward this solution, because if we look at modern China, which would be the leader of such a new civilization, the desire for technology, the admiration for technological solution is in China as strong as in the United States. Therefore, they may be heading to a similar path. The second model is, the second solution could be that there is a strong social movement in the Western world or in Europe in general, which could address those problems. The problem with this solution is that the left forces in the society who usually have the task to do such things, they have been changed during the Cold War. Today's left is much different than the left 100 years ago. There was a shift of issues during the Cold War away from the social question towards postmodern values and issues like minority rights, feminism, environment issues, climate change, and so forth. And these kind of left is relatively corrupted, to say the least. And they have also become a part of the ideological system of the today's Western world, and therefore it is unlikely that they will be able to present a solution for the problems of civilization of our time. And this brings me to the third possibility, to the third force that could make a difference. And this is a question if there are conservative groups and conservative critics who could address the problem of culture, because this dystopian future to which we are heading is also a problem of culture. In the last half century, European culture has become more and more nihilistic. It has lost its sense for beauty. It has lost its sense for the spiritual dimension of a human life. And maybe a new cultural force, conservative critics in Europe, could try to translate some of the older features of European culture into our time, give it a modern form so that we can regain some of the cultural complexity European culture once had. And there are actually 4 elements of European culture of the Age of Enlightenment, which could maybe translate it into a modern form and resurrect it. There is, for example, during the Age of Enlightenment, during the 18th and 19th century, and even in the early 20th century, European culture was had a great awareness for history and historical processes. This was the result of the secularization of Christianity, which believed in salvation history. And this was secularized in the Age of Enlightenment into the belief in progress and the belief that mankind can rule its own historical process. If we could regain some of this awareness, maybe we could lead history in the right direction. The second thing that was very important in the past European culture was the awareness for the question, was the awareness for the fact that human beings are consciousness beings. The human mind was a kind of mystery during the Age of Enlightenment. There were a lot of philosophy, a lot of books, of literature who addressed the riddle of human consciousness. And in the last 50 years, our culture has turned away from this question, turned away from the question of freedom and reason, and started to be concentrated on the body and on issues like sexuality and so forth. And so we have lost the sense that being human means first and foremost to be consciousness. If we could change our culture in such a direction that this becomes once again a main feature of European culture, then I think we could guide the historical processes in a more meaningful direction. And the third thing of the past culture of Europe, which could maybe be renewed, is that during the 18th and 19th and early 20th century, there was great admiration for artists, for writers, for philosophers, poets, composers, and painters. And at that time, those highly developed individuals like Goethe, Pushkin, Dostoevsky, Mozart, they gave an example, a testimony, what can a human being achieve, what it really means to be human. And if we could regain some of this perception, some of this awareness again, and would be able to establish a culture that is once again able for admiration of high examples of the to address the problem of technologies, of the geopolitical confrontation, and the wealth concentration. And finally, the traditional European culture that existed for several hundred years was based on a dualistic understanding of reality. Yes, there was a progress of natural science, but it was combined with a second realm, literature, philosophy. So there was always the understanding that matter is not everything, that there's also a spiritual, mental dimension to human life. While in the last 50 years, we have lost this. We have gained the worldview that human is only a natural, a higher developed animal, and that everything is matter and everything can be discovered by natural science. So if we could restore our culture, widen the horizon once again, and then I think we could escape the nihilistic cultural trends of the last 50 years. And this would enable us to solve the political and social and civilizational problems we currently have. And I would like to emphasize that I think that for this cultural renewal, this cultural resurrection of European culture, which is very essential, very important, that there the Eastern Europe, especially Russia, has to play an important role, because the interpretation of European culture from an American viewpoint is extremely strong in Western Europe, because America is there present for 70 and more years. And if it comes to Eastern Europe, to those countries who were formerly socialist countries, they have a deeper connection to the traditional European culture nowadays. And maybe they can play a positive role in this cultural shift that is essential for our future. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. And Vladimir.
I'm trying to get a confirmation from Oksana that she's ready to start in 5 minutes.
But she needed 15 minutes, correct?
Yeah. What I'm saying is that she will be ready in 5 minutes. And if you are not against it, I would propose that we kind of make a very small summary of the first two reports. If you please, my vision is that both reports kind of underline the possibility of, let's say, short but very well-organized study of what can be done in, let's say, 10 years to come to initiate different kind of research, maybe coordinated by the Moscow State University, maybe coordinated by, let's say, the goodwill of the expert society. But the first two reports show, in my humble opinion, the necessity to either formulate the positive perspective or the negative perspective, but don't make it a kind of dual perspective, because dual perspective seems to be less, let's say, relevant to what really is happening, in our minds, I think. So I think that black and white perspective is not working. Some perspective that might be shared by a larger number of experts could encompass different analysis, either based on personal experiences or based on certain methodology of, let's say, 10-year perspective. I mean, I'm sorry for my English. I'm sorry for the way I kind of formulate things. I have a message from Oksana, which saved me. Alexander Gasparishvili, would you be so kind to let Oksana in?
Yes, sure. I cannot see her among those who need to
Has she applied?
No, she hasn't yet.
Let's move on.
Okay. So
We will be happy to see her.
okay,
What's the
she
problem?
will get in. Then let me then present my small personal remarks on the what is the Institute of International Studies in Vienna that I represent. Let me make a couple of quotes and some I wouldn't say ideas, but some proposals for further research that we kind of started with your kind support and with kind support of Moscow State University, which also took some notice of us, although most of us has graduated from 20, 30 years ago. So my proposal, or let's say my paper, is about the concept of complex society as the basis for a pragmatic analysis of political process in developing countries. Professor Gasparishvili, Oksana can't get in. I have.
Yes, but I cannot see her. I'd love to let her in, but where is she?
Okay, so then I think this problem will be settled sometime. I'm not going to say many words about our institution because we have Dr. Walter Schwimmer, who will be hopefully saying some words about it, and Alexander Akimov, thank you to him, also introduced this project to your kind attention. The only thing I would say that about this institute, at least how I see it, is that the institute is an example of a continental thinking. If we read French historiography, continental thinking is something else. So in pan-European intellectual space, we call it alternative, which means innovative and promising. So I have to explain why are we trying to stimulate the research of people from different experts, highly esteemed experts from different organizations. So the long-term goal of the organization is to prepare, promote, and publish research in order to develop a more balanced model for the development of the complex socio-economic structures of European and Eurasian region. To test and approve the arguments of experts on current and promising socio-economic processes, as well as to ensure the participation of representatives of non-hegemonistic powers in the nomination of alternative scenarios of the future in the above processes. I'm sorry for being a bit too philosophical. Regardless of the political role of specific experts, IIS's research is professional and statistically verifiable. If you are interested, you can have a look at our first report 3 years back. It's about statistics. It's about Alexander, she can't get in. Okay, it's about a necessity to use statistics that can be verified or not to use them at all, because all legal entities have all countries have their own statistics. Some time ago, a couple of years ago, we have initiated a small independent intellectual platform, which we called EIR, Euro, India, Russia, which has, by the intention of the initiators, joined other entities in a groundwork for an alternative or a broader way that would better account for historical experience, human resources, and social capital of countries in Euro-Asia, Euro-Asia, not Eurasia, that it has been doing up until now. And we are happy to have you all participating in this effort. Most of our associate researchers has been supportive from early 2000s to the idea of initiation of then very popular World Public Forum Dialogue of Civilizations, which from the first session in 2003 has outlined two main global issues that should have been solved for a perspective of world development by a possible global effort. It remains to be seen whether this task has been achieved. So these two issues were the issue of inclusion and the issue of introduction of modern sets of secularized technologies. As we all might be witnessing, both issues have not been solved up to the moment. And in our view, this has led to the current wave of disintegrational processes. But it doesn't mean that these issues might not be solved by, let's say, small local communities if big actors or big powers fails to do so. Just one quote from Professor Jan Breman, who was one of those who initiated the forum in 2003. At first session, he stated that exclusion is certainly not of recent origin and cannot only be related to acceleration of the process of globalization during the last quarter of a century. There are various dimensions to exclusion which do not necessarily overlap. In an economic sense, exclusion refers to inability to be engaged in gainful employment which yields enough income for satisfying basic requirements. In political terms, exclusion implies lack of access to sources of power, the inability to participate meaningfully in decision-making processes from the household levels upwards. In a social sense, exclusion is equal to disintegration, the loss of respectability and dignity in the eyes of self as well as the others. That's a big quote from Professor Jan Breman of that time. And another quote from Hans-Peter Dur, who at that time was the director of Werner Heinesberg Institute. Unfortunately, he passed away, but he kind of stressed the importance of what Dr. Hauke has been saying today already. The impressive advances of the natural sciences reinforced the hope, cherished especially during the Enlightenment, that in the end and in principle, everything in the world might be accessible to human knowledge, so far only evades our rational insights because of its greater complexity. So you see that the great complexity does not mean that it can be summarized in a proper way. And if not solved by the big governments or the big power struggle, then it might be solved by small groups of researchers that will solve it on the local level, not necessarily on the global level. Having said that, as an appreciation of great minds of our current global history, I would turn to the topic of my presentation, which deals with the importance of a notion of a complex society, whether national or international, in search for the big answers to the big questions, which in my humble opinion is more than important for studies of possible future transformational scenarios and scientific globalistics. First, I will make 3 points. First, should we plan our future and still share our ideas internationally and locally in a defragmenting world structural environment and the post-pandemic reality? Might and should we invite some research in the world about the shape of the world, which will most possibly happen in 10 years from now, not necessarily waiting for the UN set goals for 2040. Can we do something before it? Can we do something to 2030? My personal answer is yes, we should, if our mission is to facilitate responsible statesmanship. Professor Akimov has touched upon this issue in his presentation about about the prospective scenarios of the productive forces development in the so-called developing countries, which fully adheres to the purpose of IISA studies and research and its attempts to stimulate this discussion of these issues. Because even the notion of developing countries is kind of, tricky stuff. Some experts also name these countries, I mean the developing ones, as a late start countries from the perspective of their emergence and active participation in current globalization practices. Their start were late, so they kind of try to find their place, but not allowed to, in the way they want to. While this term can also be productive for description of the developmental goals of a new normative globalized world, remains to be seen, but possibly a better explanation of what is development in present global civilization and what is not is also remains an interesting subject of research. From the pragmatic point of view, Russia, Vietnam, or India, or even China, and many others might be attributed to the category of late start countries, while enjoying themselves hundreds of, even thousands of years of their authentic evolution as cultures, civilizations, or countries, and active relations with other cultures, civilizations, and countries, both neighboring and situated quite distant from that. So that's possibly some way to solve the ineffectiveness of, let's say, global or super global calculations of possible world order. Second, the current COVID-19 epidemic, in our view, should not overshadow the fact that the structural global economic crisis, which has occurred in 2008, mainly on global periphery at that time, returned this year in a new and a deeper form. I can quote a very respectable and influential Institute of Economic Forecasting of the Russian Academy of Sciences, which specializes in fundamental, applied, and exploratory scientific research in the field of analysis and forecasting of the socio-economic prospects. But I'm not going to make a big quote. The position is quite straight. The scale of shocks happening in the world and Russian economy allows experts to consider the current crisis not as an economic phenomenon, but rather as a social one. It's a social crisis, not necessarily an economic crisis or like it used to be some 10 years ago. Third, trying to make another impulse for better understanding of European and Eurasian realities for the people outside of these regions, I would propose, after Alexander Akimov's presentation, and we've been in contact a lot for very many years, I would propose a notion of new locality that might be productive for experts who explore the perspective and challenges which may not be in the mainstream discourse, but nevertheless greatly affect our future. I mean, our great symbolic but pathetic definitions like globalization or regionalization made many experts start thinking and superficially talking about global and regional processes, possible implications, migration flows, mobility, tolerance, and many changes to the way that they saw the world before. And it has, in my humble opinion, created a wave of populist interpretations and commentaries whose influence on the public and intellectual discourse might be qualified as not very productive. From my perspective, while the elitist discourse still maintains the need for new formats of integration or other examples of big thinking or big narrative thinking, or even inventing new narratives, the intellectual trends on the grassroots level is characterized by opposing vector. What one would experience while interacting in his social groups looks more like individualization or critical assimilation. And acceptance of these assumptions might be quite productive for improving both the knowledge of experts as well as a public discourse. My last remark, finally, I would dare to propose that more effort might be put in bringing more knowledge about different online distant educational programs and historically proven achievements, and not only by the big and central universities like Moscow State University or big European universities, but smaller ones, not necessarily as big as the huge universities. As just reported by BBC, there will be no face-to-face lectures in the next academic years due to coronavirus, as stated by Cambridge University. Then why shouldn't we think of inviting much smaller schools, universities, and groups that could use this time for the purpose of, let's say, making their recommendations for a better and more humanistic world order. Thank you very much for your time. I'm trying to send the link to Oksana again because she can't get in.
Александр Трапезевич, у вас микрофон не включен.
Dear colleagues, I'm sorry. The microphone was turned off. Sorry, Vladimir, you can see from your email, I sent you a print screen that...
She's not, if you're talking, sorry, about Oksana, she's
not in. But anyhow, we are much beyond...
Using the wrong link.
Sure, maybe. Yes, anyhow, we are beyond the time.
Okay.
And I think that the reason is because we do not try to comply with our requirements. So how about the break that we had to have, because I need the time to download some presentations which our participants sent to me.
Okay.
How about 5 minutes break? Do you agree? Everybody agree with this idea? So please turn on your microphones and videos. So, and now it's, so in 5 minutes, we'll start again.
Walter, do you hear me?
Whom are you?
Okay, Walter, this is Vladimir Kulikov.
Okay.
Will you be ready to take the floor first?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Then I think we'll need another 3 or 5 minutes to restore the order and to get used to this Zoom translations, Zoom communication, which we are frankly not very much keen at. There are people sending different reports, and the organizational work is not stopping, and we will be available. We will have a chance to read them through, both in summaries and in full text, if you prefer. I can organize them and send all 17 presentations to you if you want to. And there is some, let's say, there are some ideas inside that might be fruitful for the development of the Institute, whatever you say.
Ну что, может быть, когда начнем? Или еще 5 минут не прошло?
Я-то готов. Вальтер готов. Я думаю, что...
Ну, смотри. Пришла Оксана Галтуна принять. Все, появилась. У нее, видно, была неправильная ссылка.
Может быть, мы начнем все-таки с Вальтера, я ему предложил, а потом мы,
да, конечно, мы
пойдем дальше. Вместо Тиберио Грациани попросим Леонида Марковича выступить.
Да.
Александра Дубового. Если наш уважаемый чешский коллега присоединится, я пока не вижу, чтобы он присоединился, он прислал мне текст на чешском, то мы тогда Оксану Викторовну попросим где-то в районе 14 присоединиться, если ей это удобно. Я думаю, что...
Да.
Оксана Викторовна, здрасте.
Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте, Оксана Викторовна. Здравствуйте, очень рад вас видеть.
Взаимно. Приношу извинения, по техническим причинам смогла присоединиться только сейчас.
Да, то мы очень волновались, думали, что что-то со связью, потому что я вас не видел, наконец нашли, увидели, все, теперь...
Да, вы знаете, к сожалению, не сразу удалось войти, какие-то сложности технические были, ну, главное, что все позади. Все позади. Да. Я пыталась, правда, войти через... Ну, не буду отвлекать техническими сложностями. Все, я уже на месте, я в порядке.
Вы имеете двух ваших верных слуг в том смысле, что мы и техническую часть осуществляем тоже сами, поскольку как-то передоверять студентам пробовали, но это еще хуже. Поэтому...
Нет, это бывает. Обычно у нас студенты очень надежные, очень хорошо, у нас все прекрасно всегда со студентами, но все-таки мы решили полагаться только на себя, доверить себя, так сказать. Это, говоря английским языком, и challenge. Как вот это у нас пойдет. Кстати, все, что мы сейчас говорим, это, между прочим, идет сейчас в прямую трансляцию. У нас сейчас транслируют все наше выступление на сайте глобалистика.ру. Сейчас можно прямо нас смотреть, если что, и как мы даже обсуждаем наши текущие вопросы.
Мне кажется, ходы записаны, как говорил.
Все так и есть. Правильно. Кстати, в этом есть тоже интерес. Видно, что у нас идет живое обсуждение. Я думаю, что 5 минут истекли, и мы можем вполне начинать нашу беседу, наш круглый стол. Да, и... Владимир, I think it's time to give the floor to Dr. Schwimmer.
Walter?
Yes.
Walter, please.
We can't see you, but we hear you.
I put the video on. You should be able to.
We see you and we can hear you. We are waiting for you. So, okay. Walter, please.
Fine. Thank you very much.
We give you the floor and please share your opinion with us.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Vladimir Kurikov, who did so much to make this roundtable within this globalistics conference possible and brought together this very distinguished round of people we are listening to at the moment. Vladimir is not only the brain of the International Institute for Social and Economic Studies, but he is also the heart and the soul of this institution. And I'm really grateful to him, what he has done for ISIS. ISIS is thought to be the answer to the main challenges to our civilization. And with Vladimir's help, we put together a network of scientists and of experts to give the answers to this question. But turning to the topic I should speak about in this roundtable, the European Concord, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. When we talk about Europe, we talk about the whole Europe. This is not only because we are now in the framework of a conference of the Moscow State University. No, it's my deep conviction that we must take care of the whole of Europe. Europe is too small to be divided. I just recently found the estimation of the United Nations of the development of population until 2030. The estimation for the world population is about 8.5 billion people living on this globe. And Europe, including Russia, has less than 10% of this number. So we need, if we want that Europe plays a specific role in the world, we need all Europeans, we need all of Europe, and we need Russia in particular. And we have to find the way how this Europe will look like. Secondly, I want to talk about the vision we are missing for Europe. The founding fathers of the European institutions, Council of Europe, European Union, developed their ideas during the Second World War, when they were banned from politics and had time to think about the vision. How could Europe look like after the devastating World War, after the atrocities that happened in Europe? And they succeeded. They succeeded to have a vision of united Europe as a peace project. And this is still valid. That Europe...
Deepak, can you turn off your mic? Deepak.
Whatever. Deepak, please turn off your microphone.
Sorry. Deepak, please turn off your microphone.
He already did.
Okay. Walter Stroll.
Can I speak now again?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you. The European project has been a peace project, and it succeeded so far. But for too many people, peace in Europe is self-evident. The wars are far behind of us, and even for my sons, the Second World War is like the Napoleonic Wars. But I think it's still necessary to emphasize that Europe is a peace project, and for this peace project, we need the whole of Europe. When in 1989, 1990, Europe changed, and there was a chance that the whole of Europe will be a democratic one, a peaceful one. One missed to establish a vision and a strategy how to deal with the largest European country, with Russia. Immediately after the change, when Russia, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when Russia was in economic troubles, European Union in particular used to patronize Russia, which was of course a big mistake. And those who were in favor of patronizing Russia were not able to cope with the new situation when Russia's economy recovered and Russia started again to play an important role in the world order and in the European order in particular. If you look to this, to the relation of European Union with Russia, there was the idea of a strategic partnership, but it was never really implemented. Never. There was only one practical approach. It was in the EU-Russia summit in St. Petersburg, I think it was in 2003, when they developed 4 common spaces for But again, it also was very forgotten. There's still some...
Анна Викторовна, у вас выключайте, пожалуйста, микрофон, когда вы не...
Да, хорошо.
Спасибо.
Sorry,
dear colleagues, sorry, please.
Technical problems.
Dear colleagues, please turn off your microphones.
Not all of them, but the one, only leave one on for those who is reading.
Who is speaking, please.
Okay, now it's sent again to me. When there was a real crisis between Europe and Russia in 2014.
Здравствуйте, господин Валтер. Помните на Родосе наши встречи с Земаном еще пенсионером? Добрый день.
I'm sorry, please. Dr. Schreiber is speaking now. Please don't interrupt him. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Dr. Schreiber. Please.
Yes, thank you. In 2014, there arose a real conflict, a real problem between European Union and Russia. It was because of the conflicts in East Ukraine and in Crimea. And at this time, there was the last EU-Russia summit in 2014. And it was already overshadowed by the Ukrainian crisis. Can you imagine? There was one tool to solve common problems. There was one tool to discuss common problems. That was the EU-Russia summit. And that was not used anymore. The same applied to the NATO-Russia Council that was suspended by NATO. So one missed the opportunity to have a real dialogue, a real political platform. There was only one event which gives little hope to me, a glimpse of hope. That was the Minsk Declaration of 2015, of 12th of February. In this Minsk Declaration, the 3 presidents and 1 chancellor, Putin, Merkel, Poroshenko, declared that they are committed, they are still committed to the vision of a humanitarian and economic space from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And this is a vision which is close to my heart, which I followed during my time as Secretary General of the Council of Europe. And I think we have to revive that. We have to come back to this vision of European cooperation, of European spirit to extend the peace project to the whole of the continent. That is my view important. And we have to discuss what is the role of Europe in the new world order. The world has changed dramatically and substantially since 1989, 1990. New forces were imagined. Can you imagine that if the United Nations organization would create it now, not in 1945, would there be any more three permanent seats out of 5 given to European countries? I don't think so, because the center of power have moved, and we have to take it into account. And to make the European way of life strong, we are not the strongest military power. And maybe in 2030, we will not be anymore the greatest economy. Maybe we are still the great Europe, the whole of Europe, but maybe we are not anymore the strongest economy. But I think we have to contribute to permanent peace on this globe a lot with our cultural identity, with the spirit of a peaceful Europe, and that is worth to fight for. And I think the ISIS can do a lot to strengthen this vision, and I would like to invite all of you to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, for Professor Schwimmer. Thank you very much for your presentation and for invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Leonid Grigoriev. If he is ready, we'll be happy to listen to his presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I am starting my own timer to make it in 10 minutes.
Great.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the invitation for this interesting event. I feel myself like economist among mostly political sciences professors. The economists normally criticize elites in this situation, and I will start with very simple an observation that we are sitting online on the Easter Island and discussing what is going to be after the pandemic of coronavirus. The whole Moscow, the whole world is discussing what will be after. We still before the any sign of the end of the pandemic, and I'm working very closely on this side. My topic today is very ambitious, but it's possible to make short. Let me remind that Paris Climate Change Prevention Agreement and CDG both were signed in 2015. It was actually inertia after some period after the crisis of 2008 and 9 was behind us, and most of sanctions were just beginning. So it was the last glimpse of cooperation. So both agreements were signed with intentions to do something serious about it. As economists, let me assure you that practically nothing can be done on a major scale. There are a lot of small, reasonable improvements here and there, but we haven't made any serious steps ahead in CDG and in climate change prevention. I am part of the process producing, I'm part of the only Russian big forecast for 2040 on energy and climate in working closely with it. Not only on climate change. I would touch upon, let's say, 4 points. Climate, infrastructure, inequality, something else. Doesn't matter. I will go by CDGs. So practically, destruction dissolution or disbanding of global governance is obvious. And pandemic came at a very inconvenient moment for cooperation to fight it. It's the first pandemic we are fighting consciously because Spanish flu was actually during the war and nobody resisted. And the only good news was that pandemic and stoppage of the consumption came not at the end of the upturn, not at the time of a normal economic crisis, but somewhat before. But it's it's a very little for assurance. And what we observe now in the world of accusing each other on how it started, how we monitor it, how we count the graves, how we what we are doing about vaccines, what we are doing about treating, what we are doing later, is a very bad sign on the future cooperation on everything. So global problems actually are in danger. Now I will go by very briefly by each of, or by some of the 17 CDGs, just to make it obvious. First, on poverty, we probably made a huge step back, not only on CDG, but we probably by poverty made a step back to beginning of the millennium goals, because we have probably half a billion poor people this year because of recession and coronavirus, and by 2040 we will have 2 more billion people, one of them in Africa, and probably number of poor people by the criteria, meager criteria, $1.9 per head a day. We are probably back to 2000. Hunger attached. Health is obvious. Everybody saw the difference between how works European system of health, how is Anglo-Saxon, Brazil included. And out of a sudden, as Alexander Rar mentioned once, now, why East European countries are not experiencing that much of the trouble? And as far as my students writing courseworks on Germany, reporting me that in DDR regions, coronavirus is much more lower than Federal Republic regions. So we have interesting consequences of the dead socialist system, but still something is working in the healthcare. Energy and climate. This year we will have interesting experiment on how looks like the world in which rich people don't spend too much gasoline and kerosene on aviation, because April numbers are minus 15 million barrels a day in gasoline, in minus 5 million barrels a day, to give a 20% of the output of 100 million, and minus 5 or maybe more million barrels a day of kerosene for aviation, because by 30th of March, it was only 60,000 flights a day out of 180,000 in January. Now is less. So we have a lifestyle. Now we're going to CDG 10 to inequality. We have absolutely outstanding experiment this year, because all the bans on recreation, on restaurants, on travels, and on other entertainment, sport, and everything, it's mostly the ban on the consumption of the fifth quintile, mostly. So rich people are prevented from spending money. Of course, poor are suffering. It's not about it. So from the point of view of demand for consumption, it's down the demand, well, actually consumption of the rich strata. It means we have some delayed demand, not too much, but they have delay, we have savings. So poor going down, rich, well, let it be 1 trillionaire. The problem is the fifth quintile all around the world, Russia included, basically not spending money. I'm sitting here. We are not buying shorts. We are not buying cars. We are not going to restaurant. We are not flying to Maldives. The recovery from this recession will be dependent on hedonism of a fifth quintile. If rich people will go to spend, we will have recovery. If they wouldn't go, we will not have a recovery, or at least some speed of a recovery will be affected by how rich people coming out of the quarantine. So we have technically less inequality in consumption at the moment, but actually out of a recession, a rich strata will come more rich relatively to poor, because poor are spending savings. Rich people are stockpiling savings. That's so nothing like 10th CDG between countries as well. We don't have effect of solo. We don't have effect of Kuznets, no umbrella. Institutions, of course, institutions is a problem. And finally, since probably I don't see but somebody will help me. And finally, on 17th CDG, on partnership and so on and so on. What partnership? We are surviving mostly alone, how we can. Now we will have next issues. First, trust of numbers, because all these numbers are important, because if we don't trust numbers, we don't trust if country became clean of coronavirus or not. It will be important for aviation, for recreation, for transportation. Few regions of Europe I call it white spots or clean spots. We may make an agreement like a travel balloon between Australia and New Zealand. But actually it's, that's it works. So just few words. What is very important, to prevent the elites fight on vaccines and trust. Otherwise, we will not get out of the mess. We need to establish a mechanism of recognizing treatments, tests, who is clean, and all the rules for transportation. Otherwise, you will be waiting for not 2 hours to make sure that you are not carrying the bomb. You will live for three days in each airport before anybody would be allowed to the plane. If you want to get out of this, it's just the immediate need for recovery, because otherwise nobody would spend the money, and it's need for establishing some cooperation. Otherwise, we stay on the Easter Island, and we perfectly know what is the end of the Easter Island civilization. Thank you.
Leonid Markovich, огромное спасибо. Thank you very much, Professor Grigoriev. It was really a very sobering experience to listen to your arguments, and it will take quite some time to get these arguments written. I mean, from the economist who is in charge, who has the responsibility, and from the experts that kind of trying to explain why you are right, why the CDGs are not working. I mean, we had emotional feeling that they will not be working, but we didn't have figures. And now when we have figures, we don't trust them. And really, I appreciate your idea or a thesis that the elites can fight as long as they want to. They can fight for 20 years now. No problem with that. Just mass speculations, who was the first to start it, who was the second to react on it, and not properly, but it's of no interest. People are not listening to it. It has no relation to the way they live, to the way they think, and it has no in my personal view, it has very light perspective for the elites to survive at all. Maybe New Zealand is a fantastic place where they can continue their arguments, and nice country. Thank you very much. Again, Alexander Dubovy, are you in?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Thank you very much again, and may I kindly ask you to take the floor, and to all the listeners, Professor Oksana Galutvina was not very lucky today. Finally, they have switched off her internet in her building, so she thanks everyone for waiting for her, but she will not be speaking after Alexander Dubovy, and we will invite engineers Denex Bitek to take the floor.
It's conspiracy.
Absolutely sure. It's from New Zealand. Alexander, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind invitation, and many thanks for the organizers of this very special, great event in these very difficult times. So the topic of my presentation is the European Union in a post-COVID-19 world order. So the starting point of my presentation is the following assumption. The pandemic will not so much change or reshape the pillars of the world order, but rather deepen certain already existing key global trends without, however, fundamentally changing them. Against this background, what key elements of the world order will the European Union have to face in the years to come? So let's focus on four main characteristics. First, new bipolarity. The dissolution of a de facto unipolar world order, the relative decline of the United States, as well as the rise of China, leads to the emergence of a new bipolarity between the United States and China. And this is just an intermediate step towards a confrontative multipolar world system. But nevertheless, this emerging new bipolarity between the United States and China will further increase pressure on the European Union to take sides. Secondly, connectivity wars. According to Mark Leonard from the European Council on Foreign Relations, connectivity wars will be the order of the day. The ties that bind countries together will not be broken. So we don't speak about the end of globalization, but these ties that bind countries together will not create conditions for genuine multilateralism. It will be rather the opposite issue. So instead of that, the major powers will use the links as weapons, leading to further trade wars, cyber attacks, and sanction systems. Thirdly, new regional great powers and the return of the spheres of influence. The relative weakness and decline of the United States goes hand in hand with the rise of powerful regional great powers. These regional great powers have only limited claim to global power, but almost unlimited aspirations to regional power in areas of their privileged interests. And these aspirations for regional dominance will lead to the return of the concept of spheres of influence. And fourthly, because of that, we will see a renaissance of the neutrality policy or non-alignment policy. While in the Cold War, the Western alliance stood against the Soviet bloc, the upcoming new bipolarity will create much more confusion. So most countries will keep their options open and work with the Chinese on some issues and with the Americans on others. But against this background, the non-alignment or neutrality policy will become an attractive foreign policy option, especially for the countries of the so-called Europe in between. And in this context, redefining relations with the United States, redefining relations with China will be crucial for the future of the European Union. In 2003, during the European-American debates about the war in Iraq, Germany's foreign minister, Joschka Fischer, used the very accurate remark that the United States are a power, but the European Union, on the other hand, is an experience. So today, the European Union is at the point of where the European experience cannot be maintained without meaningful political and military action. So the mere survival of the European Union will depend heavily on the capacity of European governments and citizens to perceive the European Union as a sovereign power that can compete with all the other great powers. So what makes the European Union particularly vulnerable in this new era? And so the main problem which makes the European Union particularly vulnerable in the new era is that the European Union still sees itself as America's ally, and for good reason. So after all, the United States have been de facto European power, true ally and friendly hegemon for the last decades. But American security policy seems no longer to include the concept of allies. And according to Daniel Hamilton, the United States is no longer acting as an European power, but rather becoming an external power in Europe. Because of that, the United States will play a more destabilizing role rather than a stabilizing role for the survival of the European Union. And there's also a severe risk that some of the EU member states will prefer to base their security on bilateral agreements with the United States. Today, for the first time in history, the European Union is faced with a situation in which none of the other great powers is really involved or interested in the preservation and success of the European Union. On the contrary, they are attempting to become involved in domestic policy of the various member states of the European Union in the hope to weaken the European Union and make it work for their interests. And against this background, we should ask ourselves the question, can the European Union go wrong? Europe has repeatedly failed over the past 70 years, according to Ivan Krastev. And those failures have been the building blocks of the European Union's success. But things are different today. And yes, of course, the European Union can go wrong. And the European Union can no longer take peace for granted. And what is even more serious, it should not even take the American military and nuclear umbrella for granted. For although NATO still exists, the present American government, and also probably the future ones, will not see the security threats in the world through the eyes of its allies. And the possible collapse of the EU represents an existential threat for all member states of the European Union. And at the same time, the mere survival of the EU, a kind of muddling through, is not sufficient to guarantee its security. So the security of the European Union and the Europeans will depend on the EU's ability to strengthen its strategic autonomy, build an autonomous defense identity based on enhanced military capabilities. And the European army is decades to go. Let's just face the obvious. And PESCO is quite a nice try, but definitely not good enough. Maybe after a possible withdrawal of the United States from the NATO could become an interesting vehicle, a starting point for an European army. But the first step should be finding new political identity for the European Union, because none of the political ideological narratives of the past, be it the narrative of the post-1945, of the post-1968, or the post-1989, seem to make any sense today, especially the most recent narrative, the Francis Fukuyama's notion of the end of history. Francis Fukuyama was definitely right, at least for the EU itself. We are at the end of history when the past does not matter anymore to the present. And the price for the long peace period of the European Union was the relinquishment of historical memory. But as Walter Russell Mead put it pointedly, history is back and history is hungry. So the long period of peace and prosperity of the European Union in the last 30 years was rather quite an anomaly of international relations, and the liberal world order in which the European project is deeply rooted no longer exists. And there are hardly any turnarounds to expect through the change of American policy, because the American policy will not change anytime soon. And since we have, since this conference takes place in Moscow, at the Moscow State University, maybe just the very last point of the EU-Russia relations. So, what did go wrong in our relations? I think the main point is that there were different expectations and mutually exclusive narratives from the beginning. And these different expectations and mutually exclusive narratives led to the fact that a common vision about our future, about the relation between the European Union and Russia, would never emerge. Both sides used the same terms and yet understood them to mean different things. Although there were countless forums for dialogue, both sides talked past each other for over 25 years. And because of that, massive mutual disappointment and alienation was thus programmed. So the mutual sanctions are against this background just the visible expression of our alienation. And despite the weakening of the transatlantic ties, only a purely pragmatic economic partnership between the European Union and Russia itself is conceivable in the near future. And I think that in the next years, our relationship will maintain kind of strategic decoupling. It was initiated back in 2014 after the outbreak of the Ukrainian crisis. And in this sense, we will face a dynamic status quo in the relations of the EU and Russia, which will assume a hybrid, cooperative, confrontative character and oscillate between pragmatic cooperation and hybrid confrontation. And just the very last question. If you remember this old Radio Yerevan joke, when will the things get better? Radio Yerevan once asked, when will the things get better? And the answer was, as many of you know, it has been already better. So, thank you.
Dear Alexander, thank you very much for your brilliant presentation. Being Russian, I would say things are always a little bit not normal, but I mean, we still hope for a more pragmatic, better page in our relations. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate your logic, and frankly, I share it. Dr. Zbytek, are you ready? Okay, perfect.
Можно так доложить, да? Добрый день. Я, с вашим разрешением, буду говорить на русском языке, потому что за 68 лет английский. Значит, я хочу, во-первых, поблагодарить, что могу участвовать в этой конференции, и хотел бы поговорить о чешско-российских отношениях, особенно экономических, за последних 10 лет. Я работаю последних 13 лет как председатель управления делового совета предпринимателей Чешской Республики по сотрудничеству с Российской Федерацией. И если в целом надо оценить сегодняшние чешско-российские отношения, включая экономические и торговые, Конечно, надо прежде всего посмотреть, какой взаимный баланс между нашей торговлей. Поэтому я буду использовать некоторые цифры за последних 10 лет. Так, например, торговые отношения фактически колебаются на уровне где-то от 3,5 до 4 миллиарда долларов чешских изделий ежегодно в Россию и где-то от 4 до 4,5 миллиардов долларов США в Чехию. Среди наиболее известных чешских изделий, которые экспортируем в Российскую Федерацию в последних 10 годах, это прежде всего автомобили «Шкода», различные автозапчасти. Например, в прошлом году это было где-то за 670 миллионов долларов США. Разные компьютеры, датчики за 310 миллионов долларов, потребительские товары для семей, игрушки, коляски за 150 миллионов долларов, лекарства, медикаменты, материалы для семьи, авиационные двигатели и так дальше. Конечно, в том числе технологию для современной малой и средней энергетики, которая была также очень удачно в последние годы экспортирована в Российскую Федерацию. Сегодня такой маленький сюрприз. Может быть, вы знаете свечи зажигания, Бриск, Табор, Русицкий город. Мало кто знает, что каждая третья, четвертая свеча зажигания в России является чешской маркой Бриск, Табор. Конечно, имеет свой завод, дочерний завод в Тольятти, в Российской Федерации, в Самарской области. Но следует отметить, что около 80% чешского экспорта идет в соседнюю Федеральную Республику Германия. И сколько чешских товаров реэкспортируется в Россию под немецким брендом, никто не знает. Предполагаю, что даже больше, чем составляет прямой чешский экспорт. Автомобильной промышленности, а также в точном и транспортном машиностроении это однозначно. Что касается российского экспорта в Чешскую Республику, то он по-прежнему долговременно выше по сравнению с чешским экспортом в Россию и варьируясь от 4 до 5 миллиардов долларов США в год. Конечно, разница в среднем составляет от 500 до 800 миллионов долларов в пользу Российской Федерации. Как в прошлом, например, чешские компании покупают в России в основном сырье, такое как нефть, природный газ, химическое сырье и прочее. Только в прошлом году импорт нефтепродуктов в Чешскую Республику составлял 1 миллиард 700 миллионов долларов США, природного газа почти 9 миллиардов кубов на сумму 1,6 миллиардов долларов, изделия из железа, алюминия около 300 миллионов долларов, сырья для чешской химической промышленности, угля около 350 миллионов долларов и так дальше. Такие также были очень интересные цифры в туризме. Например, с 2010 года до конца прошлого года посетило Чехию более 5 миллионов россиян. И Чешская Республика, особенно Прага, Чешский Крумлов и также, конечно, курорты Карловы Вары, Марианские Лазни и другие в нашей стране стали очень популярными зарубежными направлениями для россиян. Например, в прошлом году из 10 миллионов иностранных туристов, которые проживали более 2-3 дня в Чехии, было более 600 тысяч россиянов. Но мало кто знает, что российские туристы, что касается ночей, которые ночуют в чешских гостиницах, на первом месте по пребыванию в Чехии 5 цен ночей. Поэтому в целом можно констатировать, что несмотря на разные политические, не всегда хорошие отношения, обмен товарами, обмен в туризме продолжается. Следует открыто сказать, что взаимные общественные и, конечно, экономические отношения могли бы быть значительно лучше, чем сегодня. С 2013 года на двусторонние отношения очень негативно повлияли разные эмбарго и запреты на экспорт ряда современных чешских машиностроительных технологий в Российской Федерации. Будь то запреты и эмбарго со стороны Евросоюза, членом которого, конечно, Чехия является, но, к сожалению, особенно американское эмбарго, которое бескомпромиссно затрагивает любую чешскую компанию, которая нарушает эмбарго на Российскую Федерацию. А это, опять же, особенно машиностроительная продукция, которая известна чешская во всем мире. Это, конечно, печальный факт, и меня не покидает весьма горькое ощущение того, что некоторые чешские политики в настоящее время злоупотребляют этой ситуацией как на муниципальном, так и на национальном уровне. И также ряд, на мой взгляд, провокационных действий, которые не помогают улучшить социальные и общественные, и особенно экономические отношения чешско-российские. Но я убежден, что таких политиков нет много. К сожалению, они занимают значительное место в чешских СМИ. И в этом отношении СМИ оказывают весьма негативное влияние, в том числе на экономические отношения между Чехией и Россией. Деловой совет предпринимателей Чешской Республики и наш партнер, Деловой совет Российской Федерации по сотрудничеству с Чехией, мы занимаемся особенно рядом удачных методов, как организуем конференции, семинары, участвуем с нашими компаниями на крупных выставках, ярмарках. Я бы мог сказать, например, известную Брненскую машиностроительную ярмарку Чешской Республики, и наоборот, мы участвуем почти каждый год на машиностроительной выставке «Инопром» в Екатеринбурге. Последние годы мы также сосредотачиваемся на содействии восстановления сотрудничества между чешскими и российскими врачами, которые, к сожалению, после 1989 года полностью распалось и фактически прекратило свое существование на официальном уровне. Мы в прошлом году, в декабре, с 2 по 4 организовали в Москве большую конференцию «Здоровье для всех». Это была трехсторонняя конференция Чешская Республика, Российская Федерация, Великобритания, где приняли участие и установили прямые контакты со своими российскими коллегами ведущие чешские кардиологи, онкологи и эпидемиологи. Конечно, тогда мы еще даже не думали, что может быть такая международная пандемия коронавируса, которая в течение 2 месяцев полностью превратила глобальные политические, социальные и экономические отношения. И последствия, которые мы уже начинаем ощущать и в Чешской Республике, в виде начала большого экономического кризиса, резкого замедления чешской экономики и, конечно же, чешского экспорта. И также полное замораживание международного туризма, который за последние 20 лет стал фактически новым экономическим сектором в экономике Чешской Республики. В результате этого международного экономического кризиса валовый внутренний продукт Чехии также резко упадет. Последние опубликованные официальные данные Чешского национального банка говорят о том, что в чешской экономике ожидаем спад ВВП до 13 и более процентов в сравнении с рекордным годом 2019. Конечно, это будет связано и с неприятным ростом безработицы, ростом социальных проблем, что, несомненно, затронет не только Чешскую Республику, но все страны Евросоюза, Российскую Федерацию, может быть, почти все страны мира. Поэтому мы хотим нашими проверенными формами и надежными методами продолжать. И в ближайшее время только пандемия нам позволит, и будут сняты все эти разные эмбарго, и начнут летать самолеты, организовать чешско-российские мероприятия на особенно деловом уровне. И наоборот, мы думаем, что этот кризис, он прочистит рынок в другую сторону. Много таких посреднических компаний, которые были созданы огромное количество, обанкротит и позволит компаниям надежным, которые выйдут из этого кризиса сильными, работать напрямую. Поэтому мы готовы, несмотря на эти тяжелые моменты, продолжать нашу работу. Я сам оптимист, потому что на протяжении всей своей жизни справлялся с рядом фундаментальных политических и экономических событий и перемен. Поэтому я и сейчас верю, что даже этот печальный политический период и недобрые на данный момент чешско-российские отношения скоро закончатся, а мы вернемся к корректным всесторонним отношениям, уважая друг друга, причем уважая и определение отличия наших стран. В заключение моего доклада я бы хотел поблагодарить организаторов конференции, а именно господин Валтера Швимер-Вас и господина Владимира Куликова за предоставленную мне возможность принять участие в конференции и высказать свою актуальную оценку чешско-российских отношений, особенно экономических. И, конечно, как мы видим, хоть это сегодня очень сложно, перспективы взаимного сотрудничества. Спасибо за внимание.
Уважаемый господин Избыток, блестящее ваше выступление, которое подталкивает к мысли о том, что и европейские большие структуры, и отдельные государства и России все-таки, скорее всего, перейдут к многоаспектной политике, к многоаспектному взаимодействию. Мне не нравится слово «гибридный», но в этом, пожалуй, есть большое будущее, и я надеюсь, что мы сможем подготовить какие-то бумаги, которые могли бы вашу точку зрения довести до структур, принимающих решения. Я бы попросил Александра Рара выступить сейчас, поскольку у Оксаны Викторовны интернета нет, и было бы замечательно, если бы вы поддержали своим выступлением наше мероприятие. Александр.
Vladimir, thank you very much for the invitation. I listened carefully to the speeches of my Austrian colleagues, Mr. Schwimmer and Mr. Dubovi. I think they presented a very thoughtful view on how the European architecture, how our relations with the United States, China, with Russia are developing, and how they might develop in the aftermath of the Corona crisis. My talk here will be focusing on the question of Ostpolitik, of the German Eastern policy, whether this is still possible or not. You all remember the term of Eastern policy came from the German West, West German policy of Willy Brandt and Egon Bahr 50 years ago, which was directed towards some kind of rapprochement with the Soviet Union at that time. To make it shortly, I think that the revival of this policy is today rather impossible. Why? Because of other geopolitical circumstances in the 21st century than we had in the 20th. But a strategic cooperation between the European Union and Russia in specific areas is very much possible. And it could be also successful. At the end, I think that we should also try to revive the historical idea of a wider, or better say, a bigger Europe. This idea is definitely not dead. Let's look very shortly in the past. We had, over the last 200 years, we had a lot of changes in the European security architecture. We had the Holy Roman Empire, which broke up because it was destroyed by Napoleon. Then we had the destruction of Napoleon by a coalition of European states. We had the Vienna Congress, which itself lasted for 100 years and was destroyed by the First World War. After the end of the First World War, we had the Versailles Order, which was again destroyed by Hitler attacks on his neighbors. We had then the defeat of Hitler by the Allies, and the establishing of the Yalta Order, which lasted for almost 75 years. And this order was destroyed and changed by the fall of Berlin Wall. After the fall of Berlin Wall, we had establishing a new order, which I would call the new Paris Charter Order. Exactly 30 years ago, all states of Europe, including the United States and Canada, signed this charter, which became a fundament for this new European, but I would say also liberal world order. That again, order had been, in my view, destroyed by the Ukrainian crisis, but not only by the Ukrainian crisis 5 years ago, but also by the NATO and the new enlargement against Russia, against Russian interests in the past decade. Now a new European order is emerging, but it will be again built on the destruction of the old order. How it will look like is an interesting, it's worthwhile interesting discussing it, but I'm not sure yet in which direction it will go. The old Ostpolitik, it was clear, was focused on détente, on arms reductions, on arms treaties, on multilateral institutions which have been successfully established in Europe and in the world during the Cold War. We had an energy alliance which was functioning other than today. We had also a Helsinki process, the OSCE, which brought East and West closer and closer together. At the end, the Berlin Wall break apart. Democracy came in whole Europe. We had the reunification of Germany. We had the end of Cold War, and we had an end of communism. And for the years 1990 till 2014, we built on these principles and the successes of this old Ostpolitik. The Ostpolitik was key for understanding the future and for building a common future. There was a clear chance of establishing a common European security and economic space through all on the whole territory of the OSCE states. Then in the second decade of the 21st century, this old Ostpolitik was destroyed. We speak definitely of a destruction of this policy. Why? Again, because NATO and EU became the only pillars of Europe, and Russia had no place in the security architecture of this new Europe. The European Union started to conduct an Ostpolitik against Russia, focusing on the interests and the context of the East European states, which were closer to Germany and France and the old Europeans than Russia, which was more distant to the new European Union. And also the post-Soviet republics became, through the new neighboring policy, a target of this Ostpolitik, which again, it was interpreted by Russia and others as something which was directed against Moscow. In my view, one of these crucial misunderstandings and misconception was that the European Union faced and wanted to build its partnerships with countries like Russia solely on values and not interest, like in the 20th century, where interests play a very important role in the Ostpolitik. The West was against any kind of nationalism on European soil, and the fact that Russia started to build a national state caused alarm in the capitals of the West. And if you ask today a very simple question, what does the EU want from Russia? The answer will be very easy. EU wants and waits until Russia becomes a democracy. Then it's prepared to work with Russia again. I think it's not a strategy. I think it's not a concept, but it's a fact. Now we ask Russia. Russia also made a lot of proposals over the past 20 years, over the past 30 years, but Russia never became concrete. It made, Medvedev had speeches here, Putin made speeches here, were wonderful speeches, but there was no more content coming from think tanks, from the elites in Russia, what they want from Europe. If you ask today what Russia wants from Europe, you won't get a clear answer. At least I don't hear it. I hope we'll get it maybe in a conference like this. Yes, Russia would say we want trade, we want recognition of Russia in Europe, we want a reduction of the role of the United States, but this is not enough to move towards building a common European future. And so we have a resurrection of Europe in the boundaries of the Holy Empire, Holy Roman Empire of 1,000 years ago, without Russia and with a very strong and existing value gap in Europe, which from my point of view is dangerous. I agree with Alexander Dubovy, it's even becoming stronger, this gap. The Western and Central East European states integrated into a US global security project. Russia, of course, is not part of this global US security project and will never be. But the West is becoming a civilizational project, which of course is alien and even hostile in many ways to the Russian traditional civilization project, and of course to China, which is now starting also to play a more vivid role in the east of Europe. I'm coming to the end. I would say that in the past 10 years, yes, we had seen some attempts to revise and revive the Ostpolitik. We wanted to find new fields of cooperation, like, for example, in combating terrorism, in climate change, in migration policies, in stabilizing the greater Middle East. That did not materialize. We're still living in a world where completely two different narratives split our thinking and split our policy in this on this very crucial issues where we could cooperate. But I think in two fields we could achieve cooperation and a new Ostpolitik. First, this is a common security space under the definition of a new security aspects. And this is, for example, the fight of pandemia. It's a fight against uncontrolled migration, and it is the stability of a greater Middle East. We have to find common ways to create this common security space. I think that could happen in Europe. And the second is something what Vladimir Kulikov and myself are working with other colleagues in Germany on that. This is the issue of a Green Deal, a new green alliance between Russia and the European Union. A lot of articles are being published about this now. We're trying to revive this debate or start this debate. I think it's a new chance to create a common green space between Lisbon to Vladivostok, but it should become a win-win situation for both sides, for the West and for the Russians. Russia is the biggest land in Europe, and Siberia and everything that belongs to Russia is also part of the lung which makes Europe live. And it's much closer to us than the Amazons in Brazil. So we need to find ways to cooperate. Ecological agriculture is a field where we can cooperate. Hydrogen technology instead of fossil fuels is a possibility in 20, 30 years. Well, but we will start to develop the technology, mutual technology right now. And we are working on this. Plus, of course, common technology in developing alternative energy resources. I think this is a very interesting theme. It's, I would say, it's political correct. It brings us not against each other. It can only bring us together. It points the way how to build a safer and a better and a more comfortable world. Let's work on that, and thank you for the invitation.
Alexander, thank you very much for your brilliant speech, and it gives us a big picture and is a number of small pictures. So even multi-aspected policy should be based on some grounds which you have proposed, and I share them with you. You know it, and I will be doing my job as long as I can do it. I would add that without kind of calibrating the pictures of what we want in let's say 10 or 15 years from now, in the field of education, which is absolutely crucial. There are hundreds of thousands of younger Russian children who are studying German, not because they don't like English. English is okay with them, but as a second most important question, because they are looking for some answers on how did Germany and German cultural heritage influence the idea of economy, what you call Wirtschaft. Many of us here doesn't even know that there's a difference between economics and Wirtschaft. So I find this additional space of cooperation, which we can influence. I mean, we of course we will prepare the necessary documents for the leadership of Moscow State University, but this is a small thing that might turn big. It's not German influence in Russia or Russian influence in Germany. It's the interest of the next generation towards more comprehensive, open, and very global, linked world for them, for this younger generation. So I think there's one more sphere where we can communicate and try to exchange the best online courses, because hopefully there are also many children in Germany who would like to understand where the Russia will develop when they will become grown-ups. Thank you very much again. Sorry for talking too much. Thank you.
Well, and now I would like to give the floor to our young colleague, the student of the Faculty of Global Problems of Moscow University, Maria Vysotchkina. Maria, please share with us your ideas of zones, Russia and China. Please, Maria, I'll well switch on your presentation, and you please tell me when I have to show your slides 11 and 12, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, it's correct. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Yes, perfect. So you can start right now.
I will.
Just set it, and for the whole presentation, it will be showing the 11th slide.
Great. 11th slide, correct?
Yes.
Just a moment.
So while you're setting, I guess I can start. So greetings, everyone. I'm happy to participate in such great scientific event as Congress of Globalistics 2020. And I would like to tell you today about free economic zones of China and free economic zones of Russia and comparing them. First of all, the definition of free economic zone. Unfortunately, overall, there is no clear definition of free economic zone. I took out the average one. It is a special economic zone or free economic zone is a designated territory of a state that has special preferential regime for business activities in customs, participants, investment, and technology. In Russia, there is also a special definition for free economic zone. It is shown in the state law, and it is pretty dry and unspecified, so I'm not going to read it. But I'm going to be focusing on the Chinese special economic zones or free economic zones, as you wish, the zones, because as we know, the rising economy of China was due to huge success of these zones, especially Shenzhen free economic zone. So I'm going to tell you right now about the main goals of the first Chinese economic zones. They were made to attract foreign capital so that on its basis, the government can start development of the coastal cities as well, create them as a window to the world, attracting foreign direct investments, as I said, and innovative technologies, creating and developing the infrastructure on the territory of the zones itself, and using the foreign investors as channels for selling goods, which ensures an increase of exports and income for the whole country itself, and also transforming the country's policy of openness and external economy and leading China to the country with special socialism with market specialties. So the main preferential measures for residents of these Chinese zones are mainly tax incentives, custom privileges, and more loyal currency and finance regulation. So they simplify for the residents taxes, regulations, and also reduce payments for resources and services such as utilities, land lease, buildings, and structures. So the main success of Shenzhen Special Economic Zone is that districts, cities, and provinces of China have established their own trade structures on the territory of the zone. Through the work of these structures, they export their products to the world. This process helps to reduce the economic gap between coastal cities and inner regions of the country. Also, the zone has created all possible conditions for attracting the latest technologies as well as reproducing them. So now, Shenzhen is well known for its technological advancements, and this is all due to these attractions. And using all available means of production, the zone develops production on the basis of joint cooperation between Chinese and foreign founders, foreign investors. This also brings out the problem on the early stage of Shenzhen when these joint companies were secluded by Chinese partner and the foreign partner, and mostly only the Chinese partner invested its money, not the foreign one. So in the zone, the Chinese capital was circulating as a foreign one, and that was a huge problem. So the next thing I'm going to tell you that these zones in China gradually created a new foreign trade system, the leading direction of which is production to the world market according to the international standards. So in the zone, there is a unified management, joint conduct of foreign trade, coordination of activities, gradually developing corporatization, and the system of regulating activities by the government through economic and legal measures, and it's supplemented by administrative methods from the central government itself. The problems of the zone today are, well, you can see them on the slide partially, and also its traffic, its environmental pollution, its difficulties for providing services for everyone in a densely populated area. And previously on the early stages, as I said, the circulation of Chinese capital, and also there was problem of illiquid currency, renminbi, and also there were several problems with providing water resources and electricity to support all the industrial zone. As for Russian special economic zones, I can say they originally started since 2005 with adoption of federal law about special economic zones in the Russian Federation. And in 2006, an official decree created a company, special economic zones, 100% of whose shares are owned by the government. The purpose is to develop manufacturing industries, high-tech industries, tourism, health resorts, port and transport infrastructure. It is officially, and it can be seen in the law itself. Today, there are 25 zones currently operating in Russian Federation, but the result of the most of them is criticized due to the low efficiency of budget funds, low interest of local officials in the effective cooperation of the SEZ, excessive bureaucratization of SEZ. So to solve some bureaucratic issues, you should go to the Moscow instead of solving them at the place of the zone itself. It's very inconvenient. But creating free economic zones in Russia overall is a great experience and a great possibility for not only developing the country's economy overall, but also for underdeveloped Siberian regions and the Far East. So the preferences are created exclusively for SEZ residents, and unfortunately, are granted to non-governmental companies that are not related to the zones. Also, it is worth noting that the tourist zones do not have custom privileges and do not use customs procedures. There are production also and port issues that do not receive proper attention. For example, there was an idea of creating a Tumangan zone, or as it alternately called Pogranichny Fund. Zone was a plan to access the cooperation with China, Korea, Japan, but unfortunately the project was frozen. Chinese invested a lot of money and capital, especially in the railway, but Russia did not show sufficient activity for the development of this project, so it was cancelled and frozen at all. Right now, according to the Ministry of Industrial zones, there are overall, as I said, were criticized due to the lack of its efficiency. The creation of one workplace in the zone in the end cost 10.2 million rubles. And as a result, only 21.1 thousand jobs were created overall for these years. However, there are some positive examples of Russian special economic zones. Among them, Alabuga zone, Taliati zone, Lipetsk zone, and St. Petersburg zone. In 2017, the FDI magazine, the annual global rating for economic zones, especially noted the St. Petersburg zone for active cooperation with business incubators for startups wishing to switch to large-scale production. So as I think, can you please show the next slide? Yes, oh God. Okay, so possible measures that improve Russian zones to become successful are the following. The zone operation should be based on a long-term development plan for a specific zone itself. Without this plan, no budget funding should be provided. Second, to improve the legislation of the regulation, the zones, clarifying existing legislation, or possibly introducing new laws. Also, is probably would be better to expand the benefits, tax, customs, administrative preferences, the list of permitted activities, including not only specialized, but also related activities to be carried out on the territory. Also, there can be encouraging the provision of additional services to the residents, such as centralized PR, consulting, legal, financial services, educational services, equipment rental, etc. Ensuring a significant financial responsibility of the federation subjects, and managing companies for non-fulfillment of obligations. Introducing financial incentives for local leaders based on the results of economic progress in a particular region, and ensuring control over proper spending of budget funds, transparency of their use, and stimulating not only the territories, but also priority industries with special benefits. So as example, establish additional benefits for participants in fishing activities in Primorsky region in conditions for free port of Vladivostok. So overall, I can say that Russian special zones have a great potential for development. One of the main problems is lack of law legislation, and also the intransparency of spending the budget funds. But with all possible measures, we can create as successful zones as they were created in China in 1970s, 1980s. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's really very interesting presentation and very interesting speech. However, I have a short question. What is your personal opinion? What do you think? If these economic zones really have a future?
In Russia or in the world?
Both in
general?
Russia and in China.
Well, I guess in China they already have changed their initial purpose from being the windows to the world. They are now a basement of innovation and creation of new technologies. So right now, the Shenzhen zone has changed its slogan from, how to translate it properly, from made in Shenzhen to created in Shenzhen.
So like actually, they are not economic zone anymore. It's something different.
Well, they still are called economic zones, but their purpose and their actions are actually a lot more different than it was in the 1990s, 1980s. So right now it's like more innovative zones and creating new technologies, and also I don't know, it's a base for telecommunication agency in the Shenzhen especially. Yeah. And
Thank
also,
you.
and as for Russian part, I guess we have a possibility if we manage the zones and control them properly.
Okay, thank you, Maria, very much. And now I think we deserve a break. I believe that we can stop our conference for 10 minutes. Now it's 2:30 on my watch, so we can start our last session at 2:40 Moscow times.
Okay, and
if you do not mind.
Professor Velmini, be ready to start the event, okay?
Good. Professor Velmini, what do you think about it?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So in 10 minutes, we'll start. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Владимир.
Да.
Ну что, по-моему, идет очень хорошо, как ты считаешь?
Я бы сказал больше, поскольку у кого интернет закончился, неспроста.
Да. Я думаю, что интернет как-то так сам собой не заканчивается.
Блестяще выступил Вальтер, он как-то отцентровал.
Очень молодец, очень хорошо. Нет, все прекрасно выступали. Наши девочки... Да, замечательно. Все замечательно выступили. И несмотря на то, что, конечно, мы даем больше времени, чем обещали, тем не менее, мне кажется, очень хорошо.
Спасибо.
Хорошо, что не бывает. Ладно, сейчас последнее добьем, и все будет хорошо.
Давай, пошли пить кофе.
Да, можно будет пойти. Давай.
Пока.
Александр Тенгизович, можно спросить?
Well, we are waiting for Vladimir. Should we wait another 2 minutes or we can start?
For some reason, I'm not in.
Okay, you are here. So can we start?
Yes, sure, please. I don't have, the big picture, but I will try. Yeah, I have it. Thank you. So, Dr. Velmini, would you like to continue?
Please turn on your microphone. We cannot hear you.
Yes, of course.
Should I start the presentation?
Yes, please. We can be on the first slide. Добрый день. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, such an esteemed company of colleagues. My thematic is a little bit more narrow compared with the previous one. Is about the effect of globalization compared with regionalism in Central Asia, and more specifically, how the possibility of accession of the Uzbekistan to the European Eurasian Economic Union can change dynamics in the region. First slide, please.
Just a moment. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, to approach this thematic, first of all, we have to look at what globalization meant for Central Asia during the first year of independence, and the source to look which were the source of the globalization in the region. Essentially, globalization was a process led by the moment of unipolarity of the United States, the hegemony that the United States and Western countries had on international relation. It was so Central Asia was caught in the neoliberal economic approaches of the so-called Washington Consensus, so liberalization, privatization, and in economic terms, this led to Central Asia becoming supplier of natural resources for global economy. Parallel cultural process where the democratization paradigm, pressure for changing their political system inside the region. In cultural terms, there was also pressure for uniformization, for adopting foreign models inside the region. Security terms, the situation remained quite vague, as there were no mechanisms that were provided to face the challenge of security within the region. Other sources of globalization then became the action of China, that was quite absent in the first decade of independence, and then became more prominent in the after 2000, and more determinant after in the last stage with the adoption of the Belt and Road strategy and the infrastructure project that China is enforcing into the region. Great consequences in changing the technological industrial profile of the whole region. Still important as a source of globalization, the Islamic one, that was changing the cultural values and the cultural environment of the country of the region. Some other minor, but the effects were quite negative. Deindustrialization of the region, again, the country of the region became suppliers of raw materials. Cultural disorientation, difficult to find themselves in the new environment. And as a final result, as pointed out by Vinokurov and Liebman, the region became a vast and economically insignificant space lying between the two main economic centers of power that were the EU and East Asia. Next, please. We're not going by slides, yeah?
That's it.
Oh, yeah. Then there's still next one, please.
This one?
So to navigate this new environment, we attempted regionalism, where some were externally projected to the region. The United States as a leading globalization agent enforced a different strategy for the region. First, the Silk Road, then Greater Central Asia, lately C5+1. Most of them remained declaratory and were never supported by an adequate amount of resources for such a great project. There were some Turkish-inspired projects, also without adequate follow-up. Other organizations like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, still with Turkey and with Iran, but all of them without real consequences. So the 5 states by themselves tried to constitute a separate region. There were different attempts at that during the 90s. They were not successful because of internal contradiction between the 5 states. The fact that a state like Turkmenistan followed the line of absolute sovereignty that was not compatible with sharing of resources and political projects. And the situation changed only when Russia tried to decide to become itself an external driver of regionalization. Next, please. Yeah, so no, with the previous one, please.
Previous?
Yes.
Whatever you say.
Yeah, no, there should be one about Uzbekistan in mind. It's not there?
Let's see. This? Which
yes,
one?
This one. Yeah.
This one?
No, Uzbekistan.
This? Uzbekistan. Okay.
Yeah, so to understand the development or regionalism in Central Asia, it's important to pay attention to which was the trajectory of political trajectory of Uzbekistan since independence. Uzbekistan followed in economic internal terms a model of developmental state that was baked by the strong national ideology based on self-reliance, that central point of which was that never join an external bloc and follow an independent way of development. Regarding Central Asia, Uzbekistan tried to be the engine of integration, but this integration was intended to be as modeled around itself, what was perceived by the other country as an hegemonic and control the region. Uzbekistan at a certain point tried to become the regional reference for the United States policy toward the region in Central Asia. This was not successful or as expected by Tashkent, so Uzbekistan tried to follow the pendulum, so-called pendulum swinging orientation in foreign policy, moving between mainly between Russia and the United States. The same for the integration project, Eurasian integration project supported by Russia. But in the end, until 2016, mainly acted as an obstacle, as the main obstacle to regional integration and connectivity. Next, please. About Russia.
That's strange.
Next, please.
Just a moment. Okay, this one?
Yes. So finally, regional integration was enforced by the Russian action. It was initially Moscow didn't pay attention to regional process. Then he had to cope with them in a bottom-down process. It means that phenomena like migration and the security threats originated from Central Asia pushed Russia to act in this direction, to acknowledge the existence of a regional security complex where the security of the Russian Federation was strictly linked to the one of the local states. First initiative went out in 2000 with Putin, and then after the 2008 global economic crisis, the Russian action became more consequent. And as mentioned before, it went to structure a sphere of influence in the region, sphere of influence that is not an imposition to the local state, but is rather a negotiated process where some degree of indirect control is acknowledged by the local state, the influenced state, that assume these for their own benefits in a quite mutual concerted process. Next one. And then this leads to the formation of the Eurasian Economic Union. that was, apart from Russian objective of projecting global power, was to share economic benefits for common developments of all the countries, delineating a moment of new regionalism, a process that not only limited to the economic sphere, but also goes into cultural, political, and security dimension. The main objective is to develop an autonomous path of development between to protect the country of the Union from the impact of the Western-led liberal globalization, and as well by the Chinese economic expansion that's becoming more and more prominent into the region. All of this, unfortunately, was interrupted by the Ukrainian conflict in 2014. Next one. I'm running out of time. Sorry. Yeah, then at the same time in 2016, Uzbekistan radically changed his perspective and his participation in all these processes. This was led by internal necessity. Uzbekistan has to develop or to succumb to a number of internal contradictions that it has in demographic and economic terms. Uzbekistan, new Uzbekistan of post-Karimov did and went out with new integration initiatives for the region. Instead, last year, expressed his interest in joining the Eurasian economic integration process. This is on the basis of purely economic calculation to create a new outlet for his national economy, for further develop his the export sector of the economy, to overcome the challenges of his landlocked condition in Eurasia, get benefits from the Eurasian Union trade agreements with other economic areas in the world, to streamline energy supply process, find new sources of investment, and also ideally to improve its governance corresponding to the rules that are elaborated within the Eurasian Economic Union as a rule-based organization. In short, for Uzbekistan, EEAU should become a basis, a platform for technological and legal connectivity with the global area, with specific filter for that. Next one, please. Yeah, of course, Uzbekistan, the possible membership of Uzbekistan will radically change the outlook of the EU. Uzbekistan is becoming the second largest nation of Eurasian demographic terms. It has a quite developed economy with an industrial sector, so that also will change a number of dynamics inside the union. Especially can create a strong Central Asia component within the union. In case, notably, if we'll be able to coordinate with Kazakhstan to create such balancing core, balancing the current asymmetry around the Russian economy, and they all can create prospect for sustainable growth within the union. Next, please. So that the union can better interact with the global economy, protected from the turbulences of global trade and finance, in the perspective, of course, of Greater Eurasia, where as initially it was conceived, the Eurasian Economic Union acts as a bridge between the Asia-Pacific region and Europe and the Middle East. Most important, very important in this context, the way that the union reinforced by Uzbekistan and will be able to interact with the Chinese, influence the big infrastructure projects to create a way to harmonize the current East-West direction of the Chinese finance infrastructure with a north-south connectivity that is more favored by Russia in order to create an overall harmonic development of the region. This new ideal union should have a very strong security dimension. There are still big threats that are coming out from the region in geopolitical, demographic, ecological dimensions. Still, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan need safety belt around them, because otherwise they will not be able to face the challenges of the future. It's still open the problem of Afghanistan. On the top of all of this, there are important such cultural challenges. The Eurasian Economic Union should preserve a common cultural space that to face the challenges of Islamization and other kind of negative globalized influences. For this, as mentioned today, very important the cooperation in science and education that the Eurasian Economic Union will be able to develop together with Uzbekistan in order to preserve the Russian-speaking culture that today for Uzbekistan is very important in maintaining a stable society. Next one, please. There are, of course, big challenges to the realization of this ideal scenario. First of all, it refers to the effectiveness of the institution and rules of the Eurasian Union that very often are not respected by their own members. The fact that the common institutions are not performing their function as they are supposed to be on the paper. It's a matter of the leadership that Russia will be able to exert for the further development on the Union. This is, of course, very jeopardized by the still ongoing geopolitical confrontation with the West. In this perspective, Russia appears to be satisfied in considering the Eurasian Economic Union and the membership in it in symbolic more than practical terms, so further depriving the institution of their concrete means. For Uzbekistan is a big challenge as well, because the ideology of self-reliance is a very important central element of national ideology, as developed in the last 30 years. So there will be, for sure, big resistances at the level of the elites to a full membership to the Union, and remains all the contradiction that prevented regional integration to move forward in the previous year, but more especially what the kind of relationship that Tashkent and Nur-Sultan can have in the coming years. That's in short, that's everything. I already went out from my 10 minutes. I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Vermini.
My pleasure.
Say 2 words to the speaker.
Sure.
Just very shortly. I happened to publish a paper in Russian on EIS 2 years ago, end of 18. So if you are interested, it's easy. We studied a couple things. Two more points. One point, in this recession, the situation for Kyrgyz is much better than for Uzbeks.
Why?
Because Union is working for Chechens, for Kyrgyz on the Russian labor market, because they have some rights.
Yes.
So there is already some visible differences.
Yeah, labor migration is one of the main concern for Uzbekistan in becoming a member.
I was told by the manager of a huge vegetable market that it's hard to work with Kyrgyz. Uzbek is fine. It's hard to work with Kyrgyz because they have rights. And the last point, I have, if you're ever interested, I have a Ukrainian girl who re-immigrated from Tashkent to Moscow, and now my postgraduate. But she's originally from Uzbekistan. He knows everything, and she's writing extensively on migration, especially for Uzbeks. So if you need a counterpart who knows the background and who is really in the business of, she's working for some European bank in Moscow, but she's my postgraduate. She made an interesting study serving the motives of migration inside big patriarchic Uzbekian families. And very interesting how it was changing upon a time. Because they started from sending one son to work to Russia to bring money and nothing else. It was just kind of business trip from family. And later on it was changing. It's very interesting how it's on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks to you for comments.
Thank you. Alexander, may I read a short statement?
Sure, you should.
Okay, now I have to find it on my table. Okay, so just a short statement from Oleg Ozerov, who wished to participate in our conference or forum-like conference, and who is the representative of the Foreign Ministry of Russian Federation and just became an ambassador at large. He is sending his video presentation, which I will be happy to share when it comes, but just 3 or 4 sentences from him, since I find them also very much important and very practical. What he wrote: globalization in Africa, and he's in charge of Africa, let's say like this, has so far been implemented within the same parameters and as in other regions of the world, with the World Bank and IMF prescriptions prevailing. In parallel, integration processes at the regional and sub-regional levels took place. They were quite successful, which was symbolized by the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Zone. The COVID-19 pandemic raised the question of making significant adjustments to plans for implementing the previous model of globalization and integration processes on the continent. There are opinions that the previous model of globalization is approaching a critical point or a point of deep transformation. We hope that your forum will allow us to understand the main trends in the processes of globalization, including the African continent. Just a remark for him, and thank you very much for listening. I think Dr. Kartunov has joined us because I've got a message from him to follow the discussion. If not, then we're a bit out of schedule. Kom, are you there? Kom is not there. Oh,
I am here. Yes.
Then could you take a floor?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we'll wait up until Andrei Kartunov joins us. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good evening, Zdravstvuyte. I would like to thank Dr. Vladimir Kulikov, who has really been performing yeomanly service to bring this panel together. And I also greet an old friend, Dr. Walter Schwimmer. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to give a 10-minute outline of a project which wants to be very concrete, in fact, which is very concrete. And therefore, I sort of regretfully gave up on our exciting the temptation to give a sort of a very panoramic vision of what the future of the world and Eurasia seems to be or might be. And I will concentrate on what I might consider an intermediate stage in the process of changing the global order as we know it. And when I say an intermediate stage, you will understand why, when you will hear that essentially this is a very practical, methodical approach to changing the monetary structure of the world economy, because it's a very fundamental step without which we do not seem to be able to get out of the problems we have known over the last several years. Since the Nixon shock that in 1971-72 cut off the link between the US dollar and gold, which therefore made the US dollar a completely unsupported fiat currency, even though there were substantive arrangements made with the oil producers to create the petrodollar. However, the fact is that the dollar has remained an instrument entirely submitted to political and other manipulations. And as a preamble, I may refer to the work of economist Dr. Perry Merling about the economics of money and banking, which he has developed in various books and in his courses at the University of Columbia. He runs the Center for Economic Institute for New Economic Thinking. And what he says in very few words is that the intertwining of money and capital has created new vulnerabilities in the economy, which central banks have sought to address by trying desperate innovations, his own words, to stem the collapse. Cooperation between central banks show the outline of an emerging international monetary order, if indeed an agreement is reached. Modern money cannot be understood separately from modern finance. Monetary and financial theories are now inseparable. In the new system of market-based credit, dealers in capital and money markets are the profit-seeking suppliers of market liquidity. Given these conditions, can a satisfactory reform be carried out at the very core or foundation of the global monetary system? Now, many people have been working on this, and nowadays there is a flurry of articles about what's happening to the dollar, especially in the light of the new crisis, in the context of the new crisis. And my associate and friend who is listening to us on this platform, Mr. Deepak Lumba, whom I would call an Indo-Russian, and I have put together this proposal. He originally wrote a book, which I am going to summarize very briefly in this paper, which has been sent to Dr. Kulikov and which therefore should be available for those interested. Now, I don't have to tell the eminent experts here that the global economy is controlled by the dollar in the sense that there is no direct exchange rate between any currency. The exchange rate is in fact a conversion from any currency to the US dollar and from the US dollar into another currency. So the respective conversion rates are derived from their rates to the greenback. The dollar is indeed the international major and base currency. Now, we all know that this came from the Bretton Woods Agreement. I will not go into this any further because time is not free. And I will say, therefore, I will go on to say that the whole system today is made possible by the willingness of the US to run a very large current account deficit, while concurrently ensuring that the largest and most critical commodity of the century, oil, is priced and sold solely in US dollars. Now, therefore, every transaction in the world is in fact in some way done through dollars. And however, despite the massive production or printing of dollars by the US Fed and Treasury, the US has not known substantial inflows. These dollars are absorbed into the global market, since countries all need dollars to be able to purchase such essential commodities as oil and gas. So there is also, of course, a speculative purchase sale of currency for future requirements. Such speculative sale purchase for future also impact the cost today, flattening the acuteness of future spikes and drops through gradual ramp-ups and ramp-down. So if the US dollar were a normal currency, its excessive availability would have led to its devaluation in order to keep the system stable. However, as the additional dollars printed are bought by other players for their strategic speculative reserves, visible inflation is derived indefinitely. And today this has come to a head, as you know, because given the current crisis, the Treasury and the Federal Reserve have put into circulation another gigantic amount of dollars. It's running into several trillions. We don't know how many trillions will be printed. Depends upon who gets its way, whether the Republicans or Democrats. But even the Republicans have given up on any attempt to balance the budget, and they are willing to incur annual deficits that are ever larger. Before the crisis, it was $1 trillion a year. Now we are going to see several $1 trillion a year. In other words, the deficit of the US could be 5 to 10% of its annual GDP. Now, this leads us to the fact that the system as it is now is probably unviable, but there is no clear solution to this problem, which is putting the world economy into an unfair and, in a way, a dysfunctional situation. Because the question is that the more the crisis increases, the more investors take refuge in the dollar. So the dollar strengthens, when in fact it should be the other way around, given the fact that there seems to be no responsible policy as far as printing dollars in the US. And of course, the US knows that, and they feel that they can get away with it. Now, this has been made particularly visible by the role that China plays with the US as a mirror image, in the sense that China is doing quite the opposite. It is producing a lot of goods and services for the world and is selling them and accumulating dollars. As we know, there are probably about 4 trillion held between China and Hong Kong. But these dollars have to be somehow put to use, especially given the gradual devaluation and also the fact that the treasury bonds of the US pay no interest as such. So China, after essentially barred from the US investment market, in the sense that China is not allowed now to invest in corporations or industries regarded as strategic, has reacted by planning the Belt and Road, which, as we know, is a very ambitious project, which has raised a lot of anxiety in America in particular, and in the West in general, but even among China's neighbors, such as India. And we know that there is a growing conflict between the US and China, because the US is now determined to put China down to prevent China from becoming its successor as the global hegemon. And China, on the other hand, cannot really back down without impoverishing very substantially its population and renouncing its ambitions, which would be, of course, a very, very grievous blow to the prestige and the viability of the Communist Party-led government. Now, where are we now? We are seeing that essentially in the last, let's say, 30 years, the US has mismanaged its economy and has abused the exorbitant privilege, this was a famous term, to define the US role in printing the global reserve currency. But the alternatives have always been of two kinds. One has been, of course, gold, which is seen as a refuge by a lot of conservative investors. But we all know that gold does not always, in fact, does not generally meet the requirements of today's economy in terms of size, in terms of flexibility, and in terms of speed of transactions. And then on the other hand, we have seen the phenomenon of the cryptocurrency and cyber currencies in the last few years. But we know that Bitcoin, the most famous one, is not really serving the purpose of a global currency for obvious reasons, including the fact that we are not able to see how much value Bitcoin will have at any time in the future. Therefore, no matter what happens following the crisis of 2008, for example, the major banks, the central banks and the major banks of the other great financial powers, such as Japan, Germany, Britain, France, they all held more dollars than they held in their own currencies. The euro has not replaced the dollar and is not about to do that, especially with growing doubts now about the stability of the European financial system, which seems to be pretty much dependent on Germany. And then, therefore, now we see China coming up in the last few days with its first test of a cyber yuan, which essentially shows the Chinese desire to gradually globalize the yuan and make it into a currency that can easily be used for international transactions. However, no matter what China does, the yuan is still a Chinese government instrument. Many countries may not be comfortable with that. I won't even talk about the special drawing rights of the IMF, because that would be a fairly long talk, but the fact that it is essentially a basket of currencies makes it in some ways not sufficient to meet the needs of the global economy. And in the sense that it would balance the world exchanges, it would essentially support the global exchanges of goods and services with 5 or 6 major currencies, including the yuan, and of course the dollar. So essentially you are not changing the essence of the system. So then what would be a viable solution which would not overthrow the dollar and therefore cause a massive shock, which would result in international tensions and perhaps in war, and yet would not keep the dollar as the arbiter, the control instrument of the economy. And as we see now with the current policies of the US, we see a sort of a blurring of borders between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, even though the Federal Reserve is not technically a government body. So the idea, and I must give credit to, again, to Mr. Deepak Lumba, who has worked on this for years, and we came together from 2 different backgrounds to work further on this project. The concept would be to create not a currency, but an instrument of exchange, a derivative note, which would have the dollar as its floor value, which means it would not go below $1 for each 1 unit of this derivative instrument. And yet it could float and rise as high above the dollars as its the mechanics of the market warrant. So in that sense, investors who would own this instrument, whether states, corporations, or individuals, would be protected because no matter what, they could always get reimbursed in US dollars. And all the US dollars which would be used to acquire this instrument would then be flowed back into the US economy, which would therefore get a welcome boost for actual industrial revitalization, and could concentrate on its own market rather than depending on foreign markets to buy its dollars, as it were, to supply it with the goods that the US could produce but no longer produces. Now, many people have said the US cannot go back to being an industrial society because it's, let's say, the cost of living and the cost of labor is too high. But with robotics and technology, the cost of labor is no longer an essential problem. Therefore, you could envisage a US reindustrializing and not being a sort of a global comprador economy, a rentier economy, as Professor, I believe it was Professor Grigoriev who defined Rome as a rentier city. Now, the US has become the Rome of the modern world, and there is a need to replace that system with an instrument which would be regulated and controlled through blockchain and through artificial intelligence. Therefore, the stability, the fairness, and the transparency would be critical factors. And it would give everyone the ability to watch the use of the currency, of that instrument, and its liquidity and its circulation in real time. And at the same time would eliminate the cost and the time delays in transactions. we believe that the world is, no matter what, going in that direction. So the instrument that we have devised, we call it Indicia because in a way it was born in India. And it's a nice name which suggests index and other such nouns. And it would, as a result, be an instrument that would be neutral. It wouldn't be Chinese, it wouldn't be American. It could possibly be housed in Europe in terms of its regulatory mechanism, or it could be housed in another country which has good relations with both East and West. But the main idea is that it would provide a common global fair platform for trade transactions and would bring the dollar back to its natural original role, which was to be a currency for the United States and not a currency for the world. So I will end by saying that for a long time, there has been a need to revise and reform the Bretton Woods systems, which was created in 1944-45. And the Bretton Woods system is like the United Nations system. It's an outdated system because either technologically or geopolitically, it no longer reflects the conditions of today's world. And therefore, if we can engineer this kind of a reform, and we are not proposing it as a sort of a single private product that should be adopted by all. We are saying that this is a model which can be applied, developed, further perfected. And if other agencies, whether governments or private enterprises, are willing to come up with their own proposals in the same direction, then let the best one win, in the sense. Let's not try to impose a particular system or a particular brand, but let's look at what can be done that really meets the need of the world economy at a very critical stage where we are facing the prospect of a global collapse. So I will leave it there. And the paper, as I said, has been sent in advance. So hopefully it will be available. And of course, there is a book which is also available on Amazon and on other electronic media to be consulted, and it's about Indicia, so it's easy to find. There is a website called indicia.com where suggestions, comments, and reactions are welcome. So thank you very much, and let us hope something comes out of all this.
Dear Com, thank you very much. It was a pleasure as always, and I think we should think of a small additional effort after the conference ends. I mean, would anyone join me in trying to summarize all the practical aspects? Because I mean, it's a forum-like conference, that's for sure. But I'm not a specialist in every sphere, so in order not to impose my own vision on what has occurred today, just think maybe someone could join me in a day or two in order to summarize different, draw a practical tree of the conference. And with this remark, I would like to welcome Dr. Andrei Kortunov, who is the head of the Russian International Affairs Council, and hopefully you will enjoy his report as much as you did before. Thank you very much. Andrei, please.
Well, thank you, Vladimir. It's nice to be here and to see some of old friends around. As you can see from my nice screensaver, my vision of the world is not particularly optimistic. However, it's clearly not the end of story. So it gives us some food for thought for the analysis of implications of the current crisis for various international actors. And discussion right now in Russia, and not only in Russia, about whether the crisis is a game changer, whether indeed the world will be very different from what it is right now in 1 or in 2 years, or whether the crisis will be just a blip on the radar screen and we will see gradually getting back to normal. What is clear, however, is that each of international actors has challenges and also opportunities right now. And Some challenges and opportunities are purely situational and tactical. Some of them are strategic. So since I was told that I have only 10 minutes to express my views, I'd like to limit myself to speculating about challenges and opportunities that the crisis creates for Russia. And let me limit myself to 3 opportunities, which I consider to be important, and also 3 challenges, which I see in front of the Russia's leadership. First, let me start with the opportunities. I think that the first very clear implication of the crisis is that it confirms the Russian narrative, or more specifically, the Kremlin's narrative about the international system, about the world, about the driving forces, and about the future development of the world. And narratives do matter. So, in terms of narratives, for a long time, the Russian leadership emphasized the supremacy of national sovereignty, of non-interference into internal affairs. The Russian leadership exercised skepticism in multilateral structures. It also pursued a transactional approach to international system. The odds are that the crisis confirms this narrative and brings us back to the old, nice Westphalian system, where states are unquestionably the most important actor of the international system. To some extent, the crisis justifies the actions that the state has taken before, like import substitution, for example, or even to some extent self-isolation. Definitely, there is another dimension of this narrative, which suggests that essentially the liberal idea has depleted its creative potential, and that in the current world, liberalism is on decline. The way how China handled the pandemic compared to Europe and to the United States gives a lot of arguments to support this view. So this is the first advantage, and I'm sure that the Russian state media will make most of this out of these opportunities to make the case. We are right, you are wrong. We know what direction the world is moving to, and you do not. The second important opportunity is that in certain ways, the crisis implies that most of Russia's strategic opponents are likely to be obsessed with domestic issues. So that creates a vacuum of power, especially in the developing world, which the Russian foreign policy can exploit to its advantage. Especially if you take Middle East, if you take North Africa, and some other parts of the African continent. I think the crisis creates clearly opportunities for further expansion of the Russian international influence at relatively low cost. I think that if we see new examples of Russian assertiveness in this part of the world, it will be more like the Libyan rather than the Syrian scenario. This model implies indirect engagement with relatively low investment, and it allows Russia to punch above its weight. Finally, the crisis must put the current disagreements between Russia and its Western partners or adversity, no matter how you call them, to the back of the political scene, because other events and other challenges become by far more important than the conflict between Russia and the West. And that might mean that some mini or micro detente, or even a kind of reset in the relations between Russia and the West is possible. Not now, not in the way it was a couple of years ago, but definitely it might mean some kind of accommodation, because the challenges are simply too important and too dangerous for everybody to ignore them and to let them be subordinated to the old type confrontation between Moscow and Western capitals. However, there are also challenges, and let me also limit myself to only three of these challenges, which I consider to be the most apparent. First of all, I think that it's almost clear, especially if you take the example of the last financial economic crisis of 2008-2009, Russia as an emerging economy is likely to suffer more than developed economies. And indeed, it means that the recovery in 2021 doesn't look very probable. The odds are that Russia will be constrained, including important constraints in its foreign policy. The Russian foreign policy will not allow, or rather the economic environment will not allow a resource-consuming foreign policy, a lot of investment into the defense sector. So it might create limitations on power projection capabilities of the Russian Federation. Moreover, the asymmetry between Russia and its partners, especially China, is likely to grow, which might create political problems for Moscow as well. Second, one of the most evident repercussions of the crisis in terms of the moods in the Russian society is that Russia, like many other states, becomes more isolationist. So a foreign policy victory cannot be exploited as a substitute for real rise of household incomes or economic growth or social progress. Moreover, foreign policy activism can be regarded not as an asset, but rather as a liability for the leadership. And we already saw some of the quite critical, I would say, negative reactions to Russia assisting other countries like Venezuela, for example, in fighting the pandemic. That means that what sociologists used to label as the Crimea consensus is likely to end, and to, if you excuse me, just is likely to fail to serve the purpose it served for last 6 years. Second, and finally, I think the most important thing is that many argue that the current crisis is going to result with a new bipolarity between China and the United States. And if it is the case, I think new bipolarity, especially if it is a rigid bipolarity, will definitely not serve Russia's interests. On the contrary, it will create additional problems for Russian Federation, simply because in many cases it will limit the scale of the Russian foreign policy and the scope for maneuvering between the two centers of global power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very thoughtful, a very thoughtful presentation that makes us a bit puzzled by the optimism which we have been trying to show in almost every statement before you came in. And well, it's a sobering effect, and thank you very much for that also. And again, it was very important input, if not to say crucial, to all the structure that has been engineered before you came in. So my proposal is that after hearing this very presentation, we really need to have a small working group that could spend very little time on collecting the arguments, because they are very concrete, very pragmatic, very practical, and we could divide in between political, let's say, section, financial section, economic section, socio-economic section, as well as cultural one, and the cultural or civilization. Thank you again. Alexander Gasparishvili, is there anyone standing in the line? I don't. I mean, I'm planning the piano, but
Sorry. We have a presentation. It will be a final presentation of Dr. Elena Shlakhovaya. She is a research fellow of Russian Research Institute of Economics, Politics, and Law in Science and Technology. Dr. Shlakhovaya. Dr. Shlakhovaya, are you ready?
Yes.
You will speak in Russian or in English?
So I will speak on Russian.
Russian, okay, good, great. Just a moment. I will turn your presentation.
First slide.
Just a moment. Just a moment. Here it is. Here it is. Well.
Я могу начать. Благодарю, уважаемые участники. Вот мой доклад, наш доклад по нашему исследованию, скорее всего, это как пример того, как глобальные проблемы, обозначенные уже в докладах предыдущих участников, они приводят к локальным исследованиям, результатом которых, как мы надеемся, должны стать управленческие решения, принимаемые на государственном уровне. Ну, соответственно, задача нашего была исследования и основная проблема, и то, что построила программу этого исследования, это необходимость составления авторского перечня должностей научных работников, который должен действовать на территории Российской Федерации, потому что в настоящее время в законодательстве, регулирующем эту сферу, нет четко прописанного перечня должностей научных работников. Соответственно, выборка, как вы видите на слайде, у нас состояла из 251 организации, условно генеральная совокупность, она более. Это были организации подведомственные нашему Министерству науки и образования. И, соответственно, с учетом классификации ОСР у нас были представлены, по сути, все наши науки. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Второй слайд.
Все?
Спасибо. В результате проведенного опроса, который был экспертизой нашего перечня со стороны профессионального сообщества, и в результате оценок составленных нами должностей на соответствие самому главному критерию о ключевом содержании научной деятельности, данный критерий мы выделили на основе федерального закона о науке, который действует в настоящее время на территории Российской Федерации, мы увидели, что наши должности, они условно делятся на 3 группы. Должности, получившие максимальное количество одобрений, то есть они в большей степени соответствуют данному критерию. Должности, получившие практически нейтральные оценки, и должности, получившие максимальное количество отклонений. И, соответственно, когда мы посмотрели функционал должностей, входящих в каждую группу, мы увидели, что в первую должности лидеры. В первую очередь туда попали должности, которые уже существуют в нашем законодательстве согласно приказу Министерства науки и образования, то есть это те, которые подлежат замещению по конкурсу, и в меньшей степени попали должности из образовательных организаций высшего образования. Если можно, Александр, я сейчас попрошу вот быстро буквально показать третий слайд.
Так, пожалуйста. Третий слайд. Так, есть.
Третий слайд – это вот как раз должности лидера, если вот вы видите здесь уже известные всем нам должности старшего научного сотрудника, профессора. То есть, по сути, результат довольно такой предсказуемый и объяснимый. То, что нам уже хорошо знакомо в наших представлениях, естественно, будет на первом месте. Четвертый слайд, если можно, покажите, пожалуйста. Это группа должностей, получивших практически нейтральные оценки. В колонках вы видите как средний балл, так и стандартное отклонение. Здесь мы посмотрели по функционалу, и сюда попали должности, которые связаны с научно-технической деятельностью. И пятый слайд, если можно. Сейчас это группа должностей, которые получили наибольшее количество отклонений. То есть респонденты решили, что они менее всего соответствуют нашему ключевому критерию о содержании научной деятельности. Как вы видите, должности сами по себе они интересны. Сейчас у нас вот первый слайд я вижу.
Сейчас вот это пятый, правильно?
Так, пятый, да. Спасибо, пятый слайд сейчас должен быть. Это как раз нейтральные оценки должности. А вот сейчас мы перейдем к пятому слайду. Вот, спасибо. Если вы обратите внимание, то функционал данных должностей, по сути, это то, чем занимаемся мы в нашем институте, это аналитическая деятельность. Пока, к сожалению, в представлениях профессионального сообщества или представителей науки данные должности, наверное, все-таки из-за того, что они не знакомы, к ним еще не привыкли, респонденты посчитали, что они меньше всего соответствуют главному критерию о ключевом содержании научной деятельности. Если можно, шестой слайд. Они у нас так отражают. Также параллельно с оценкой и экспертизой данных должностей мы собирали еще ретроспективу данных за 2015-2019 год о количестве молодых ученых, постарались именно в разрезе предложенных нами должностей. И, как видите, большая часть концентрации молодых ученых, как нам представили респонденты, она относится к первой группе должностей. Опять же, подтверждает то, что эти должности знакомы и понятны. Но все-таки остальные результаты статистические, несмотря на минимальные проценты, они дают нам надежду о том, что должности второй и третьей группы, они все-таки обладают определенным потенциалом и полезностью для нашей научной сферы, то есть имеет смысл действительно их отнести к категории научных работников, потому что хоть какое-то количество молодых исследователей все-таки уже сейчас, даже вот за прошедшие годы там присутствовало. Ну и, соответственно, еще мы предложили открытые вопросы респондентам, нуждается ли наш перечень в доработке. Большая часть ответила, что нет, а в качестве должностей, которые можно было бы включить в этот перечень, коллеги представили, вот как видите на экране, тоже должности, относящиеся больше и к ныне педагогическим, то есть из сферы образовательных организаций высшего образования. Можно седьмой слайд. Последний, как бы каждое исследование, оно ставит задачу, это ограничение перспектив. В чем как бы основная проблема нашего исследования? Надежды, которые мы ставили, и задачи, они довольно глобальные. То есть, по сути, это разработка перечня должностей научных работников, которые можно применять на территории всей нашей страны. Соответственно, это должно упростить кадровое дело производства, в частности, учет трудового стажа научных работников. Соответственно, еще это как бы административное решение такого вопроса, как вот мы статистику уже считаем, и в мировых базах ОСР это видит численность исследователей, численность молодых исследователей, численность исследователей в эквиваленте полной занятости. Когда у нас много должностей, то, соответственно, и статистически у нас возникает возможность пересматривать те национальные цифры, национальную статистику, которую мы подаем в мировые базы данных. Но, соответственно, те задачи, которые мы поставили, они столкнулись и с ограничениями. В первую очередь, то, что мы опрашивали организации ограничено, это подведомственные нашему Министерству науки и образования. Соответственно, из выборки совершенно выпали организации, подведомственные другим ФАИВам, и их участие в подобном опросе, оно, конечно, бы более сделало бы достоверными наши результаты, или, по крайней мере, дискуссия бы и оценка была более объемной. Ну и, соответственно, то, что я уже обозначила в начале, что подобный перечень, он дает возможность пересмотреть национальную статистику от численности исследователей, он как раз ставит вопрос о необходимости пересмотра наших национальных форм статистической отчетности. На примере мы знаем все, что научные организации отчитываются в форме 2 наука, научных сотрудников. Эти же научные сотрудники попадают и в отчет для образовательных организаций. Соответственно, чтобы не было дублирования должностей, и чтобы у нас не получилось каких-то некорректных цифр, чем это плохо? Национальная статистика, хорошая, красивая статистика, она может скрыть который происходит. Ну, соответственно, определенное движение в пространстве того, что происходит на территории той или иной страны. Вот так кратко хотелось вам представить результаты нашей работы о том, что глобальная задача, которая сейчас обозначена в большинстве передовых стран, это привлечение в науку как можно большего количества исследователей. На примере нашей страны мы сталкиваемся с тем, что в этой отрасли оказывается вопрос, на какие даже должности нужно оформлять тех исследователей, которые мы собираемся привлекать для решения глобальной задачи социально-экономического развития. Ну, благодарю вас за внимание.
Большое спасибо, Елена. Очень интересное выступление. Как раз вот ваша тема, ваша работа во многом пересекается с деятельностью Центра стратегии развития образования МГУ. Наверное, вам нужно с ними будет связаться, и это вполне можно было бы рассчитывать на какое-то сотрудничество. Спасибо большое, коллеги. Владимир, может быть, вы завершите, скажете несколько слов, и можно будет заканчивать наш круглый стол, потому что после него нам еще предстоит с вами весьма серьезная работа. Пожалуйста, Владимир.
Dear Walter, would you like to summarize what we have heard today? And I will inform you that we have found some members of the working group, and we'll start our technological cooperation in assessing all the arguments and main topics that have been touched upon quite fast. And I'm really waiting for some words of you. Okay. I don't think Walter hears me well. For some reason, I think his microphone is off. So,
his microphone is off, and I believe.
Okay. So,
hear us.
Do you think we need some further discussion, friends? If so, I would welcome very much your short proposals on how we might, if it's not too time consuming to you, we might continue in between let's say our possible next session. There is nothing that formally prevents us from holding a small seminar or a small Zoom seminar in a week or two from now. I mean, at least from my part, I see no big problem. And we can then again spend rising and distributing all the reports available and all the proposals that we could gather. What do you think of that? It's not an Austrian way of doing things, but it's a very Russian way of dealing with complex constructions. You do 10 things simultaneously in hope that finally everything will work out well. Okay, so if there are no immediate suggestions, let me thank you very much on behalf of the International Institute of Social and Economic Studies in Vienna, and hopefully you have enjoyed this meeting, and at least you don't find it just another one in the sets of the meeting and Zoom conferences that you are experienced almost every day, many times. So just remember us as guys with cautious optimism that possibly is not very characteristic of general mood of experts sitting at home. But nevertheless, thank you very much again, and we really appreciate your presence, your reports, and let's communicate. We have all emails, we have all texts. Whoever needs anything, I'll be happy to assist. Thank you for the brilliant guidance of Professor Gasparishvili, and thank you for the MSU let's say, effort to provide us and assistance and providing us the floor inside this very important globalistic Congress, and giving us, let's say, the pleasure of meeting each other at this nice spring day. Thank you very much.
And the last few words, it's truly the last few words. Well, I am very happy when we could manage it, this very important roundtable. And I believe deeply and absolutely that next time we could meet in person here in Moscow, in Lomonosov Moscow State University, when organizing a new next 7th International Congress Globalistica 2022. Thank you very much again, and hope to see you again. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. We'll be in touch by email, all of us, I'm sure.
Sure, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. До свидания. Спасибо. Спасибо большое.
Bye-bye.